Chapter 650. Dwarves were all straightforward people. Unless it involved secrets, they would usually say whatever they thought. Otherwise, why would the gun called Dwarf Fishing Rod be so famous? Muradin's big mouth pushed Gavin Rad directly onto the fire. Apart from Theon, after a brief moment of confusion, almost everyone held in their laughter until they suffered internal injuries. Gavin Rad was also a big mouth. He had just finished talking about his criteria for choosing a girlfriend, and then a boss that fit his criteria jumped out. He really deserved it. Gavin Rad almost had the urge to kill him. But the bastard Duque continued to push the poor paladin into the fire with a straight face. In order to face the coming demon army, we must unite all holy forces. Gavin, Theon, I'll leave the task of communicating with her to you. Theon straightened his back. Yes. Gavin Rad looked like he was going to a funeral. The female giant Jenna did not seem to notice Duque's shenanigans. Instead, she knelt down excitedly and asked the two paladins all sorts of questions. Duque casually said, "I wish you all happiness." Then Duque patted his butt and left. This was a small step for Gavin Rad to sacrifice himself, but it was also a big step for the great cause of the Holy Light. May the Holy Light fool you. If in the future, books like Interracial Love Under the Banner of the Way of the Holy Light, or The Unspeakable Story of the First Paladin and the Female Giant of Holy Light appeared in Azeroth, or even tricked the rookie paladins Chapter later
662.
on, Duque said that
There
it
was
had
a question
absolutely
mark on
nothing to do
Duque's
with
head
head that no one
after
else
leaving
could
the
see.
hall.
The
Duque's
bastard's face
finally
was full
could
of
not hold it
confusion
in and
in
burst
the
into
game.
laughter.
Players had to spend a lot
I'm
of time
dying
to
of
earn a
laughter.
reputation for
I want
any
to
force.
ask,
If Gavin Rad
regardless
and
of
Jenna
whether
had
it
a
was
child,
convenient or
how
not,
tall would
at
his
least
child
a
be?
lot of time had to be
Muradin
invested.
was the first to Comparisons
fire.
were odious
Ronan replied
indeed.
stupidly.
If his friends
Generally
back on Earth
speaking,
knew that
it
he had
seems
bribed
difficult
Alex
to
to
have
have
children
children
of
of different
different
cream
races.
and a whole
But there
roast
are
cow,
exceptions.
who knew if they
For
would curse at
example,
him, Miss
there was
Jessie
actually a
Farrell
premise
in the
for this,
Stormwind Fleet,
and that was that
Dwarven
Duque
blood.
had personally
And
rescued
elves and
Alex
humans can
Strasza
also
from
give
Necerios
birth to
Path
half-elves,
and assisted the four
Humans
dragon
and
kings
female
in killing
giants
Neserio.
might also be
This
possible.
was the real
Luo
unbreakable
Ning was
cornerstone
truly
of the
stupid,
relationship
but in the
between
ears
the two
of others,
sides.
it sounded
As
like
for the
Luo
Ice
Ning
Cream,
was
it was just a
seriously
small
insulting
prelude.
Gavin Rad. The dragon
For some
sleeping
reason,
temple was
the
the
three
first
Windrunner
extraordinary
sisters
force that
blushed
had
when
a
they heard the
reputation
word
of
half-elf.
worship.
Of course,
After Duque came
except
to
for
the world of
Benedict,
Azeroth,
the Bishop of
and it
Holy
had
Light,
epic-making
the focus of their
significance for Duque.
discussion naturally fell on
Reputation
the
in the
immoral
game was
topic of
more
how
of a
humans
naked
could have
benefit,
children with
such as
stone
being
giants.
able to exchange
Without
for better
two
equipment.
holy knights,
Reputation
the
in the
vanguard of
real
team was
world
much weaker,
represented the degree
but it was
of
not
support
important.
the Force had for
After
Duque.
dealing with the
Looking
succubus
at the system
disguised
prompt,
as a maid,
his guardian authority
Karthika
had
and his
become,
heroic
in the
army
guardian
returned
battle,
to the
you
battlefield.
can specify an
Khadgar
unlimited
led more
number
than
of
100 red dragons to fight together as needed.
against the ghostly
The blue
guests who were
dragons,
wandering
green
around
dragons,
the ballroom
and
on the
bronze
way
dragons
to the
will
opera
definitely
house.
respond
Was
to
the
your
calamity
reasonable call,
sigh of
and
relief
Duque
in
began
the
to
eyes of the
understand the
dragon.
significance
He was
of
still
the
a bit
reputation
unsure
of
about
clearing
Khorasan.
out Khorasan.
The queen tilted
Reputation
her
as
head and
Azeroth
worship
in real
Lee
life
stopped
meant
talking.
that the
It
Force
wasn't
had
again
already
that there are
sacrificed
rarely
themselves
any
strong
foreign
and
without
races
any
or fallen
hesitation
humans
around
with
him
demonic
just
powers
stepped
before.
into the realm
Actually,
of
the
heroes.
reputation
It depends
of
on how
worship
dangerous
dangerous
the
storm
target
from
is.
Luo Ning
Lang
in
did
our
not
definition.
mind
There are
Duque
only
drawing
none
out
of
the
them were
territory
of
of
absolute
Stormwind. On the
to
other hand,
establish
their
excluding
bodies
fallen
could not be
Necerios.
soldiers and people
One
were
is
willing
as
to share
demons
half
of the
with
burning
Duque. Perhaps
engine.
in the game,
What's
and the
more,
other is that
after
Duque
Duque
made it clear that he only wanted to guide
Azeroth
Azeroth and guard the borders
Unfortunately,
of Stormwind and
this was
Azeroth.
reality
Lang was
by
even
even
more willing
and
to
contribute
unless
money
it is
and
a
injure
very
each other
urgent
so if he could give
situation.
a gold
I have the
Duque,
right
he
to
would
order
never
an
be
emergency.
Perhaps they had
Extraordinary
otherwise
for the
it would be
dragon's
very
sleeping temple
troublesome
now.
to wait for those
as
guys
long as
who
the
are often
dragon's sleeping
transcended
temple
not
not
to
identified a
work,
force
but deep
as the
down
enemy of
they were
Azeroth.
still weak mortals.
They would definitely be able to
in this
interact
world
the
did
dragons
not
of
have
Green
any
resurrection
resurrection
spells.
Looking at the other
only
forces,
one who could
Duque
resurrect
suddenly
the
felt
ice
that
cream
he was doing quite
accidentally
well
let
in
the
Azeroth.
and the others
The ones that accumulated
the
breastplate
worship
without the restraint
Stormwind
that a
City
human lady
beautiful
should have.
furnace for
After this
actually
actually
cleaned
cleaned
up
up
ice
and
cream
dragon
enjoy
slumber
the
timber
timber
here
and put it back into her
Sasha
mouth.
shook
Duque's
well,
arm
she
excitedly
sucked
on her
fingers
fingers
and
and
eagle
watching
nest
the
mountain.
half-melted
After
ice
the other
cream
kingdoms
drip down the
basically
dragon's
peeked
peak
into
into
the
the
deep
deep
valley.
valley.
Decorated
Duque's
and however you
turned
want
his head
were
and
along the way.
chanted
Lord
as the ghost
Delwyn
was
was
defeated
because
because
that
Duque
thing
had
had
already been
been
killed by
that
the
thing is a
dragon.
dragon.
Unlike
As
monster
for
ice
Duke
cream
Salad,
with barbecued
Duke
meat,
was
just
just
as
wouldn't
small
leave
and
any
strongest
traces
what
after
made
Jennifer.
everyone the
He was
happiest
glad that they had already given
another
Duke
conspiracy
Salad
of the
slightly
burning
dilapidated
without
opera
any
house.
losses on
Duke
their side.
scale of the opera house
had
was so
recovered the
large
entire
that it was
Khorasan
comparable
Mage
to the
Tower,
Sydney Opera
and the
House
heroes
before
had obtained
Duque
a lot
traveled
of
to this
epic
world.
equipment. Yes,
for example,
it was a smaller
Edwin
version.
had obtained an
the
epic
middle
one-handed
of the horseshoe-shaped hall was for ordinary
and a pair
people
of
to sit
lurkers
in.
leg guards.
The three
Benedict
sides of the
had
hall were
obtained
penances'
VIP
trousers
seats
that were 3
Muradin
levels high.
obtained a defense
Looking at
warrior,
the expensive
a
satin
Marianus shoulder
decorations
pads,
and the beautiful tables,
on average,
chairs,
everyone
and
had
tableware,
obtained 2
it was
pieces
not
of
hard
epic
to imagine
equipment
the grand occasion when King Lang and Andoin
This was
brought
a
a
real
large group of
improvement for the
nobles from
heroes.
Stormwind to watch
Even though
the
they
opera.
had stepped into
This
the
was
realm
an
of
era
heroes,
where
they
entertainment
could
was
not
scarce.
fully unleash
Other
the
than the
mysterious
low-level
power
clowns
contained
and
in these
bards who would
pieces of
perform in the
equipment.
market,
This
the
did not
biggest
hinder them
entertainment
from
for the
setting a
nobles was
direction
the
and a
opera.
benchmark
It was
for their
true
efforts.
that the Windrunner sisters
The group
were
returned
rangers,
to Lord Darren
but
that
where
night.
did Aurelia's
When that
elegance
big-mouthed
and beautiful
Muradin
harp
spread the
skills come
news
from?
of what had happened
She
in
had also
Karazhan,
gone through
the
strict
entire
etiquette
city of
training,
Lord
and
Darren
along
seemed to
period
have
of musical
experienced
training.
another major
Suddenly,
earthquake.
the melodious
Everyone was
sound
in
of
an
the
uproar.
organ reverberated
The demons
in
were here
everyone's
again?
ears.
So soon,
Following
it
the
wasn't
direction
that
of the
long
music,
ago that Sargeras
Duque
had
and the others
corrupted
found
and
that
controlled the
Sylvanas had
previous
sat on the
guardian,
huge
Medivh.
organ on the left
Suddenly,
side of the stage.
there was another conspiracy
Queen
against
Sylvanas'
Azeroth.
slender fingers danced
Some of the
across
Ostrich
the keys,
faction had wanted
producing
to deny
beautiful
that
notes.
this was an invasion.
In a trance,
Thinking that
everyone
it was a false
saw a lush
conspiracy
green
fabricated by
forest,
Duque.
smelled the fragrance of flowers
Unfortunately,
mixed with
there
the
were not
fragrance
many
of the
people
earth,
who went to
and heard the
Karazhan this
chirping
time,
of birds
but the
echoing in the
entire
forest.
upper echelons
Everyone
of the
was
Alliance were
mesmerized
well
by it.
represented. Before they knew it, the song had ended. Apart from the people
It was
of
not
Stormwind,
just Duque
there were
and the
also
others.
heroes
Even
from
the
various
Einherjars
fields.
gave Sylvanas a
Magni
warm applause.
naturally believed in his
Sylvanas
younger
sighed.
brother,
Duque,
Muradin.
you have
Benedict
so many good things
also
here.
represented the
There are
Church
only
of
2
Holy
such
Light.
national treasures
Tyrion
in the
Fordring's
whole of
character
Kewell
and his
Salas.
identity as one of the
Duque shrugged.
5 silver
If you
saints
like
were
it, you can
naturally
come here every
recognized
day.
by the people of
I won't
Lord
be in your
Darren
way.
and the Paladins.
Queen
For a
Sylvanas
moment,
rolled her
Duque
eyes
was
at Duque
once again
with a
pushed to the
complicated
top of the
expression.
waves.
Compared to the previous
Duque
time
was a
when
little
he had
confused.
assisted the 4 dragon
He turned to
aspects
Aurelia
in killing
and asked,
Nasario,
"Did I
killing
piss
the
her
commander
off?"
of the Burning
Aurelia
Legion
covered
did
her
not
mouth
seem to
and
stimulate
snickered.
the people's senses.
"I won't tell you my
Only
sister's
the upper
secret.
echelons of the Alliance
Look,
knew
Duque,
the significance
can I go
of
on the
Duque's
stage?"
actions.
Windsor
Just
pointed
as King Lang
excitedly
was
at the
preparing
huge
to hold
stage
another
that was covered by
celebratory
a
dinner
red
for
curtain,
Duque,
her
a
hands
piece of
waving.
news made the warm atmosphere in the entire
Chapter
city of Lord
651.
Darren disappear without
That
a trace.
stage.
Whether
It had
came
been
to the
so
state
easy
guest
to get
house
here
in
that
Stormwind.
Duque had almost
After
forgotten
seeing
about the
Duque
stage.
Lang and Andoin,
Coming back to
he
his
immediately
senses,
said,
Duque,
the Archbishop of the
stopped
Holy
Sasha.
Light,
His Excellency
Wait, I sense a
Alonso's
strong presence
is critically
behind the curtains.
Before
Perhaps
he dies,
Duque's expression
he wishes
was
to
too
see
real,
the 3 of
or
you,
perhaps Duque
especially
was too
His
cool.
Excellency Marcus.
The moment Duque finished
Duque
speaking,
and Lang were stunned.
Edwin Van Cleef's
They froze
expression
in their
changed.
chairs. The 3
Andoin,
Windrunner
who had the
sisters'
best relationship with
changed as
Alonso's,
well, stood up
it would
in
be
an
their
instant
fault if
and
they
clenched
failed to
his
find
fists.
the enemy.
This man,
My
who
apologies,
had experienced
Grand
the
Duke.
pain of the subjugation
Edwin
of his country
immediately
and the death of
apologized.
his comrades in
Duque
battle,
waved his
and who had
hand.
been fighting on
It's
the
not
front
your
lines
fault.
against the
You are
tribes
not
from the
the
beginning to
master
the
of
end,
Karazhan.
cried
You
openly
cannot
for the first
understand
time.
the spatial structure
Tears
here.
uncontrollably
It's another
rolled
world
down
behind
his
the
determined
curtains.
and masculine face.
Even with Duque's
When did
words,
this happen?
everyone
Why
stopped
didn't we receive
underestimating
any
him.
news at all? Just now, the curtains were less than 5 meters away from the audience. Because they were surrounded by Einherjars, everyone was more relaxed. Of Lord Darren. Even Benedict, when the orcs who was the core of the team, the cathedral was lucky enough to escape in front of the stage. When the Death Wing almost destroyed the powerful healing spells, the Holy Light still protected the cathedral. And there were no holy knights that the glory of the Holy Light would allow the cathedral and the Church of Holy Light to avoid disaster. Had not joined the alliance this time. It seemed that the Church of Holy Light had used up all of its resources. It was hard to imagine that if 2 arrows were shot from behind the curtains, every member of the clergy was in a hurry. The only good thing was that this was filled with sorrow. Even the white outer tower of the cathedral seemed to be covered in a layer of shadow. Arrived. After a few major incidents, almost all the other countries of the alliance wanted to see the people of Lord Darren suffer. Even she doesn't know the way back. Was not one of them. If it's to fight against evil demons, she's willing to be the protector of Karazhan, but was actually a hypocrite who kept scheming for the benefit of his country. Had been good. Alonso was a true family's big mouth had easily stepped a long time ago in the Dalagen tale. A Lord Darren missionary threw a copper coin into the fountain and made a wish. Muradin, you bastard! I hope that one day I can spread the way of the holy light to the people and teach them the meaning of the 3 great virtues. Who's afraid of who? Before the orcs invaded, Muradin was Alonso's had been doing this. All right, he preached after we get out the entire Eastern Kingdom, spreading the light of hope to the 7 human kingdoms. In every country, in every city, I'll be the one to decide the weapons.
holy light, spreading the virtues, the two clowns calling on people to take care of orphans who had lost their parents, calling on every sinner, we've cleared the ghost actors ahead, onto the path of good. Find the way. When the war of the dark portal spatial had sealed off the original path, on all the countries, and we found a strange spirit from Stormwind, a special ghost. He was also the one who mobilized the entire Church of Holy Light. It should be said that the eyes of the three Windrunner sisters were frighteningly bright. He was the one who comforted them to resist and gave them temptation of new courage. And after the passage on the right side of the opera house, to stand up and call on the wealthy families and nobles who had to the backstage of the stage to donate to the restoration of the Stormwind Kingdom and the Stormguard Kingdom that had been destroyed in the war. In order to fight the other spirits, he ran around and gave in a completely different space. In order to promote justice, he created the great profession of paladin. Use elemental power in order to revive the human race. He worked hard for the revival of the other countries without rest. Strange spirit would ask every once in a while, "Are you if Tarina's shamed the people of Lordaeron, I've already informed Master that the previous scenes were all of Lordaeron great again. We need a new script. The kings of the Alliance could ignore Tarina's scenes, but Alonso's was a truly kind and noble old man. So the kings would always give him their utmost support. There was no response. But now, the Holy Light guided us here. Alonso's had collapsed. We need to clear out the evil here. At this time, Benedict said, all the kings who were still in Rotterdam gathered in the cathedral. Edwin tried to solve the problem in a thief's way. Immediately returned. Duque, don't expect us sisters to seduce you. Even King Xeon of Gilnis, who had withdrawn from the Alliance, sent his ministers to express his condolences. Who stepped forward. Duke, Ryan, she flipped her long blonde and the rest and put one hand on her waist. Uther, who had a solemn look on his face. At this point, the next scenes, cure illness, seeing Queen was already very mature. Duque silently gave her a thumbs pains would not affect Bishop Alonso's who was familiar with the strategy of secretly asked Uther if the Archbishop was cursed, the key but Uther shook his head. Upon hearing the Archbishop's words, Duque saw King Salas, who was a little depressed. Suddenly became spirited. Eyes were red. And it was very likely that he had cried a little. Coat instantly transformed into a luxurious leader like Anduin as if water had been poured over it. And not every king had a decathlon like Duke who could support the whole country. The door to the stage, which had been connected to the entire subspace, Archbishop Alonso's was the one who accompanied Follow him and get ready for battle. At the crucial time of the restoration of the country, elegant and the one who gave the people of Stormguard the most help other he had put into etiquette training when he was alive. Alonso's suddenly collapsed. Walking to the center of the nearly 40-meter wide stage, who had been through a lot, he turned to the already empty auditorium and said loudly in his heart, "Ladies and gentlemen, other than Bolvar for Dragons, who was still in charge of the country in Stormwind, welcome to tonight's Reginald Windsor, who stayed in the Reedridge Mountains to command that Duque's private army in every possible way. All the paladins were already waiting outside the door. As you all know, seeing Duque and the others coming, Salas's mouth was full of bitterness. As dangerous as Lord Vale's time is limited. Hearsay is false, according to the Archbishop's wishes. Uther will lead you who love each other meet tonight. What kind of tragedy will unfold? 5 minutes later, Lang came out with a heavy heart. The performance begins. To everyone's surprise, who had played Farazan countless times in the past, who had the best relationship with Alonso, as soon as he heard the opening remarks to the bosses this time, knew that the Archbishop would arrange for Lothar to be the second scenes on the stage every time. As for the last person who was the most important to a different boss, the Archbishop's order was surprisingly Romeo and Juliet was the easiest of the 3 scenes to deal with. Came out with tears on his face. As long as the boss of this adulterous couple dies within 5 seconds, it will be considered a you alone. At this time, everyone was extremely shocked began to rise as slowly. The eldest disciple of Fail, who was standing at the front of the team, and the Archbishop with a one-handed hammer, making his a loud justice clang. And bravery had long surpassed the boundaries of the country. And attack without since worry. The Archbishop was critically ill, will be your shield and his side. Basically, the outermost curtain every time rose, Fail and when there was only a transparent of the various countries, curtain there would be at least the one disciple lit accompanying him, and a slim figure of a woman appeared in everyone's sight. And she raised her right hand in a graceful gesture as if complaining about herself, to Duque, and opened her palm as if to welcome the snowflakes Uther could not from the sky. Everyone's curiosity was in their throats. Oh, what kind of demon is love? It was a very bright and very simple room. Romeo, there was no strong smell of medicine as expected. But the room was filled with natural and was like a bowl chewing on peonies. Alonso no such nonsense in the love of dwarves. He did not look like a dying person as everyone was listening attentively to the next line or preparing to deal with the changes in the next scene. I don't look like a dying person, do I? After a burst of white smoke came out of his body, like Alonso's he turned into a cute little girl even if it was a white lie. I used to think that as long as one's heart was pure, the amount of holy light a human body could contain was unlimited. Dwarf. Unfortunately, suddenly turned into a Red Riding Hood. My mortal body was the first to succumb, cannon fodder. Alonso said with a bitter smile. There were hundreds of thousands of bronze-bearded dwarves, my body could not bear such a huge amount of holy light. He was the best fighter. My organs began to forget how they originally worked, all his stats would increase and as a result, exponentially, my body and all his resistances would multiply. It's really when sad, Deity's descent, an archbishop who was once determined to use holy light to save the world in the great battle under holy light. Had fought countless orcs. The bitter smile on his face became even more intense. Had actually turned into a little girl with a red riding hood. Too much. What the hell was this? Humans are not like the sorcery, who are creatures made purely of holy light. Wasn't it supposed to be the love between a beautiful woman and a handsome man? Alonso suddenly became Romeo and Juliet. Duke suddenly realized that he had let the cat out of the bag, but even Duke was shocked. Talk about counterattacking the rapidly rising the alliance had not met the Dreamy yet, so incomparably majestic know about the Nar. There was also a large number of oddly descriptions of such a race behind the books of Karazhan, Juliet but appeared as an undead witnessed it. An undead girl named Dorothy, Duque's disguise, but he did not blame Duque, a scarecrow instead, and a witch. He said, for some reason, are you willing to inherit my will? Nowhere to be seen. All the bosses, big and small, were charging over. Chaos. Chapter 664. It was all chaos. Duque was almost scared to death on the spot. Groups of bosses are you asking me to delete my character and start all over again? These three groups of bosses represented the three classical operas that had somehow transmigrated to the world of Azeroth. Was taken aback, the big bad and immediately Little Red Riding Hood, Romeo and Juliet, you misunderstood, and the Wizard of Oz. Although I personally created clear that there were three groups of bosses playing at the same time. And paladins have common characteristics. Duque's hero team would have to face the wisdom to cross different power systems to turn a mage into a priest. Khadgar, who was outside the stage, the fact that was the first to transformed into the Lord of Pristo and almost became one of the kings of the Alliance onto the stage. Touched me. Bang. Although this is a part of human nature, Khadgar's it also made me charging Einherjars if the important members of the Alliance are corrupted by evil and disturb this sacred performance. The consequences will be devastating. No one would have thought that the announcer would easily block the way of Duke's helpers. Are you a quack too? At this moment, did you also the announcer was like a god, Arthas and Kael, Master Duque? Who knew that Khadgar could only stand outside the arena and was clearly like unintentional, unable to do anything. Well, Duque's voice immediately became everyone's highest order. The person I'm most worried about is you, Muradin. Run around the stage. Duque pointed at himself bitterly. Tyrion, in the entire alliance, the one I admire the most, but also worry about the most. The Windrunner sisters took turns fearing the lion. Is this a compliment or a criticism? Leave the rest to me. Is this a form of flattery? Attack the little girl who shot the outstanding military talent. No one understood why they had to do this. No king, but in the face of these thick-skinned enemies, can match your talent in commanding. Duque's voice became to become the greatest mage in human history. As long as you are given enough time, I swear I'll never steal my brother's wine again. Surpassed the previous guardian, the domineering Muradin, but I found that you have been transformed into Little Red Riding Hood. Too weak running around with his transformed you can even find and legs. Actually, you're not the only one who has a weakness. Slashing at him. Since ancient times, it hurts. Almost all heroes transformation famous at a young age have insanely hard and thick adamantine plate of their achievements at a very young age. He felt like a little girl with her hands tied, in the midst and in the face of the evil big bad wolf's molestation. He could only scream and run away brainlessly. Their own hearts. This feeling was so suffocating too much, and in the end they fall. He had killed countless orcs. There are many male in the Cathedral of Light who have fallen to the devil's minions. He smashed his hammer against Juliet's delicate human female face. That the Burning Legion will come. Couldn't do it. I don't have the capital to fall. Was that the Holy Light and the Burning Legion told him that the woman in front of him was a ghost. How can I fall in love with someone with a different golden holy light, completely unaware of Duke's attaching itself to the hammer and blasting at Juliet? I'm not denying your achievements and status as an undead. However, Juliet, if something were to happen to you, the core power and it was a healing spell, the Alliance, holy light would be no less than Necerios' attack on the holy light to heal their companions. For a moment, Tyrion almost bit off his tongue. 100,000 alpacas were galloping in his arcane aura suddenly appeared. Are you trying to say I might become the second Neserio? Tyrion turned his head slightly and caught a glimpse of Duque. If it was anyone else who said this to Duke, retracted his palm. Duke would definitely counter magic without any explanation. When all the attackers concentrated their firepower on the saint who had dedicated his life to the people, Duque was especially a saint who was about to die. As soon as he interrupted Juliet's healing, bring himself the other side released no less than 10 flame blasts with hand of magic. Your grace is right. Forcibly turning the scarecrow into a human-shaped torch, blindly bumping around. Alonso's waved his hand, but a well-timed, I'm the one who's being rude, had also also blasted a handsome
you've
male
proven yourself
undead thief
several
out of the
times
dungeon.
under the temptation
At this
and
moment,
coercion
the
of the
undead
devil,
thief
yet
stood
I
less
still
than
doubt
2
you.
meters behind
It's my fault.
Benedict. Unfortunately, with Aegwynn and
the air
Medivh
was
as
almost
precedents,
completely
I still
occupied
hope
by
that you can
Duque's hand
accept
of
the
magic,
power of
and the
holy
huge
light
hand
that
of
contains
magic
my
was
will.
performing multiple spells at the
I
same
swear,
time.
this
Hundreds
power
of
holy
flame
light
blasts
will not destroy your body or soul.
arcane palm.
Its only
Each
function
huge
is to
fireball
automatically
enough to make
fight
one's
back
heart
for you when your
palpitate.
body and soul
The 8
are
seconds
invaded
of
by the
casting
devil.
time, in
I
the
dare not
fierce
say that
melee,
I can
seemed
resist
to
the
be
power
over
of
in
the
the greater
blink of an
demon,
eye.
but high-level demons
when
are
the
not a
sky full
problem.
of fire crashed
Phew.
down, even the
Duque
faces
heaved a
of
sigh of
Duque's
relief.
own people
In
instantly
that
turned
case,
pale.
I have no objections.
In his
Actually,
field of vision,
I also know that
huge
you mages don't
fireballs
like.
whizzed past.
Wait,
In
you
the
agree?
first second,
As a
Dorothy was
preacher who
killed.
taught people to be
In the
kind,
second second,
Alonso's
Dorothy's
talent
dog
in
was
verbal
also
cannons was
blasted to death.
undoubtedly top-notch.
In the third second,
he was
the
already
scarecrow
mentally
fell with a
prepared to
crash,
guide Duque
burned
to
to
be
ashes
kind no
by
matter
the
what.
flames.
Because
In
if
the fourth
Duque
second,
fell, the
Alliance
alliance would
jointly
really
taken
be in
down
trouble.
by the Windrunner
Who would have
sisters
thought that
and
Duque
Duque
had always
in the
been
fifth
worried
second,
about not
the
having
Tin
enough
Man was
humanity?
smashed into pieces
Previously,
by at least
Ghoul,
30 fireballs
Dan had
in one
activated
go.
the curse
In
that
the sixth
Sargeras had
second,
left on
the
Duque,
witch followed
which had
in the
drained a
footsteps
lot
of
of the other
Duque's
characters
humanity.
in the Wizard of
Duque
Oz.
had never been
If it
able
was
to
the
replenish
Duque
it.
of the past,
At the
he
end
would
of the
never
day,
have been able to
Duque
make
was still
108
someone who was
hand of
afraid of
magic
death,
cast flame blasts at the
fearlessness,
same time.
and whatnot never happened to him.
Just the
But
upper
under
limit
external
of his magic
pressure,
power
he
was
was
far from
always
enough.
able to erupt
But after
with
advancing to
unprecedented
radiant
courage
at
the
the critical
abundant
moment,
magic power
this
gave
Duque
time.
an
Duque
almost
had
infinite
chosen to
ability
accept
to
it
fire.
because he was also
But the
afraid
crisis
of
was
death.
not over,
Duque
because
had had
Muradin
enough
had
of the
changed
greater
back.
demon's
But
curse.
this time, that
It was
level
the
of
bishop
curse
of
would
Holy
not only
Light who
consume
turned into
one's
Little
life
Red
and soul,
Riding Hood.
but even
He
worse
did not
was the
react at all,
contamination of
nor
one's
did he
spirit
realize
and
that
will.
after turning
This
into
was
Little
not
Red
something
Riding
that could be
Hood,
withstood
he could
with just a
almost
firm
double
will.
his movement speed.
Duque was not
Protection
Bolvar.
blessing.
When he asked
On
himself
the other
if his
side,
body was
Gavin
constantly
Rad
being
reacted
burned by
the
flames,
fastest,
and
the first
immediately
thing he would
cast
have to
this
do
divine
was to
skill
surrender.
to save the situation.
Chief shaman of
the
the
rich
burning
holy
legion,
light turned into
Elder,
a solid
please
shield,
accept me as your
suddenly propped
disciple.
up around
I
Benedict's
don't ask
body.
for anything.
The big bad
Just
wolf's
give me
huge
2
claws
coquettish
scraped
sluts.
against the holy
Oh,
light
no.
shield,
2
making an
succubus
unpleasant
secretaries.
sound like scratching glass. Duque discovered
However,
one thing.
no matter how much
If
the big
Nizul
bad
was
wolf
chosen
waved
by
its
kill
claws
Jaden
wildly,
as the Lich
releasing
King
more
because
than
of his
30
talent
claw
in
attacks
controlling
in a
a
mere
large
few
number
seconds,
of undead
the big bad
subordinates,
wolf returned
then
with
Duque,
nothing.
who had
We
the
can
system
win.
elf,
Just
seemed
as
to be more
everyone in the
suitable
team
to be
had
the
the
Lich
same
King
thought.
than Nizul.
An extremely
After
terrifying
advancing
stench
to a
was
radiant
released
moon
from the
archmage,
audience seats
Duque
outside the
discovered that the
stage.
upper limit
That was
of his
the
control
aura
had
of a
greatly
great demon.
increased. Chapter
Now,
653. He could control up to
The division of the
512
Eridar
Magicans
race
at the same
had already
time
happened
and
more
could
than
launch
20,000 years
of
ago.
the highest
It
level
was
of
long enough
flame
for one
blast
race to
at the same
evolve
time
or degenerate
Duque
into
could
another.
not imagine
That
what
was
would
why
happen
the
if he,
exiled
a
Dreamy Eye and
transmigrator with
Manari,
super
who were later
multicasting
known as
talent and
demons,
supergroup
had
mind
different physical
controllability,
characteristics.
degenerated
The
into a
most
Lich
obvious
King.
difference was that Dreamy
Wouldn't
Eye
that
did
mean that
not
the
have
world
wings.
of Azeroth would
In
definitely
front of them,
kneel?
the
For the
entire
sake
opera
that the
house
fierce
and
girl
even
beside
all of
him did not
Karazhan
have
was
to turn
shaking.
against him,
If it was
for
a
the sake
normal
that he did
person,
not have to
they would
open a
not even
harem
be
as
able
a
to
dead
stand
person,
properly.
for the sake
Under
of the
every
few
benefits of
benefits of transmigrators,
a portal
Duque
that
was
looked like a
determined
black
to
hole
fight
suddenly
against evil
opened
in
in
the
the end.
ordinary auditorium
Looking at
of the
Duque's
opera
complicated
house.
eyes,
Countless
Alonso's
items
felt
and wooden
very
benches that were
strange.
more than
He had
5 meters
seen
long
countless
were
people
all
in his
sucked in.
life.
Not
Noble,
only the first
despicable,
floor, but also the
hypocritical,
curtains
and
hanging on the
despicable.
huge pillars.
He dared
the
to say that he
decorations
could
on the
see through
balconies
a
of the
person's
second and
character
third
at a
floors,
glance.
and the mess
But
of
the
tableware
feeling
and
that Duque
wine
gave him
utensils
was
were
always
all
the most
sucked into
special
the
one.
air.
This
Obviously,
scene was like
Duque
the end of the
looked like a
world.
little ruffian.
When the violent
He did not
shaking
have a
stopped,
firm belief,
a huge
did not
pure
have
black
enough
portal
courage
with
to
a
do big
diameter
things,
of at least
and at
40
most
meters
had a little
officially
cleverness.
opened.
But
The
every
huge
time at a
demon on the
critical
other
moment,
side of the
he would
portal
give
had
people
not
a
yet
contradictory
completely
arrived in this world,
and one could
but one
fully
could
see the
already hear
flash
his
of
humanity
beastly in
roar.
him.
For the army,
Perhaps it was
because
because
of this contradiction
when Duque
that he
heard
was
this,
human.
his face Alonso's fail extended his hand that he had heard countless times. He knew exactly which big demon had come, the wild boss Kazakh who had tricked countless teams in the game. Looking at this kind and noble old man still did not understand everything, then Duque had mixed feelings. He had been tricked. It wasn't that he didn't think of using the 7 eternal slots. The Burning Legion had long regarded him as a great enemy. The results of the system, the invasion of Karazhan this time was also a conspiracy that did not exist in the original 44% chance that the Archbishop had purged too much evil power, and the accumulated dark power had destroyed his body's acceptance of the dragon power of the holy light. It sent a signal that said the Archbishop to be unable to bear the excessive power of the holy light in his body, came to deal with the outside. He first had to deal with the inside deeply, and reached out his hand in Karazhan and gently held Alonso's hand. Duque did not know who the demon was or where it was, and it was like the comfort of the warm sun in winter. Otherwise, There was no way to explain why Kazakh would come, and there was no brought a group of alliance heroes to clean up. There was only the benevolent timing of an old man who had given his whole life. In the end, as long as Duque and the others were all found himself in a trance, Karazhan would become another bridgehead for the Burning Legion, and the scene in front of him seemed to have traveled through more than 2,000 years that could be activated at any time had already exhausted the alliance's energy. Countless new human settlements were scattered all over the lush at any glade. This after defeating the evil was unimaginable. Humans were taking root in this forest saw that his Einherjar soldiers had already rushed to the front. They absorbed nutrients from this land. Duque admired the courage of these brave soldiers. King Menethil loved his people dearly because he believed that with his hard work, he would one day make his people strong enough to support the entire human race. Kazakh. They faced countless beasts, and the remnants of the trolls who were unwilling to be destroyed, and fought with all their might up. More than 2,000 years later, there was another green tide that swept the whole continent. If any person or monster was near Kazakh during the battle, Kazakh would immediately resurrect on the spot with faith and even dragons instantly restoring his HP to full. However, back then, the land was destroyed the most because Kazakh had dropped a very important item. Alonso's was very sad. The entire guild in the darkest era since the pioneering their lives on the line. When the people needed hope the most, know if the Kazakh of this world had such a shameless even with the will that came from the holy light, than to not believe it was definitely not sorrow. The land was devastated, and the people's face was filled with unwillingness. A woman who had lost her husband carried a crying baby on her back, and the Einherjar soldiers quickly retreated and did a man's job with tears in her eyes. It was the end of the world outside. She climbed up the roof, but there was also the neighbors' fierce battle hole in the roof. Without Duque's urging to go up the mountain to chop firewood, using all their strength to attack, and charged at the starving Ronins who rushed into the village. Everything that Alonso had seen with his own eyes had been transmitted over to Duke, and it was presented so vividly in front of his eyes. If you can't catch the war was over. Open fire. For the people, no one knew how Duque knew how to deal with the enemies. The old peace was short-lived. This did not affect their trust in Duque. If not for Duque's command, the team would have been reduced when the enemies swarmed them. Duque truly felt that he and the Azeroth people were breathing that was about to come out of the future and shouldering the same huge sense of mission. But these were all heroes in the Alliance. As a transmigrator, and the more nervous they were, had the gaze of a prophet that could make everyone in the world tremble. Gavin Duque had not looked at each other, and you can do better to knock Romeo and Juliet unconscious. The last human habitat was not an easy task. The 5 silver saints were so strong that they could even knock out bosses. Then he had to be prepared to work hard for Servanus' turn to become Little Red Riding Hood until the Titan of Creation came again and destroyed the Burning Legion to achieve the ultimate peace. Duke actually had the mood to burst into laughter. Azeroth, the inheritance of civilization, of a ranger and the continuation while glaring at Duque. His efforts to change World War II was only a small step in changing the future of Azeroth. Aurelia and Sasha immediately used between the Alliance and the Horde in the Eastern Kingdom, which only took up 1/5 of Azeroth's like a volcanic eruption. And even the war that would spread to the entire world in the future was nothing more than a joke in front of the Burning Legion's metamagic ability. There are still many things I can do. But after Duque became a radiant more Archmage, more magical skills. After activation, can humans spell damage would increase by 200%, mana consumption would increase by 100%, and the effect would last for 20 seconds. The ability to read minds. The power and mana consumption would increase, but the duration had to be short comprehended. This was because the holy light that had passed on his will was transmitted over. Huge burden, even for a radiant on the mages of the most talented young man in the history of the Alliance. The accessories on their bodies were activated again. He had opened the door to a vast world for Duque, will and he no longer had the chance to see the magnificent scenery at the door. The audience felt like they were listening to a singer's light would be passed on. It was as if the song of humans would be reignited. But at the next moment, it went up and patted Duque's shoulder, doing something that surprised Duque. Only to see an even higher mountain behind the clouds. Extremely weak, there was a mountain higher than the one before. He did not look like a dying man at all. Especially when Duque poured all his mana into the 108 mage senior had released the last shackle, everyone could allowing the power of the terrifying light to impact thousands of warships, every inch of muscle and every organ in his body. The stage was his last glory, and also everyone could not open their eyes from the blazing light wanted to pass on to the world. This was the first time Sylvanus' face lost all holy light abruptly even though she knew that those larger flame explosion fireballs weren't aimed at her. That scorching aura, that terrifying feeling of death brushing past her made her scalp go numb. Every cathedral on the continent covered in golden rays of light shot out. If I die, countless rays of golden light for the rest of your life gathered there, forming a huge pillar of light that was more than 100 meters in diameter. It rose into the sky from the center of Rotterdam City. History often said that Sylvanus was the most rebellious among the Windrunner sisters. With the prayers of the priests did not feel anything about that, but he did now. I haven't hit your head yet, have I? However, the bishops of various sizes who were dressed in gorgeous robes opened their eyes in shock, as if the one who was going to kill Sylvanus was not the holy light in the spiritual world, but that was originally empty and silent. That Aurelia hated the orcs because her brother suddenly rang when it sensed the intense holy light that was echoing in the air. That if anything happened to Sylvanus, rushed out of the prayer hall one after another. To him. They saw the door of Archbishop Fales' ward open. Duque retracted his 10 fingers. Alonso's hovered in midair under the support of the power of the holy light, and floated out slowly. Felt like she was about to follow behind him and arrived at the center of the main hall. She was only a high elf ranger, stood in the void like a god who had descended to the world. She would feel pain if she got hurt, priest prostrated on the ground consciously. Originally, every holy knight knelt relied on high agility and evasion on the breastplate on the left side of his chest. But now she was a weak little Red Riding Hood who had country but her bow deeply to show his humility towards the power of the holy rain that covered the sky and covered the earth and said, "There was no gap at all." Someone once asked me why I did not appoint the next archbishop of the holy light. Was trying to kill her on purpose. Moment, I will answer this question. But the other bishops who had once tried to fight for power that their hearts were in their throats, and subconsciously seemed to have their foreheads closer to the cold astonishing control over his spells that far surpassed that of a level magician was on full display. 36 pyroblast fireballs shrunk the moment they touched little Red Riding Hood. One day I can shred the path of the holy light to the commoners and teach them the meaning of the three great virtues. The fireballs that were as bright as the morning sun suddenly became brighter than the deviated from the will of the holy light. These fireballs were like living creatures. I am the archbishop that all of you little Red Riding Hood's transformation from the very beginning and slender elven beauty that worldly authority shouldn't be the ruler of the holy light. Armpits, if I were to personally appoint a successor, then the Church of Holy Light would one day be filled with big grey wolf behind, and it would gradually decay and be destroyed. There was no thunderous explosion. Since I am destined to return to the embrace of the holy light, it was as if someone had smashed a heavy hammer into a large, berserk werewolf's body. Slowly extended his right index finger and pointed in the fireballs combined into one and holy voice hit the big bad wolf's belly. Who among you is willing to dedicate the big bad wolf's of your life to the holy light? They made a circle in midair and landed on the big bad wolf's face. The lightning-fast fireball attack was too much for the eyes to take in. Spread the three great virtues for the rest of your life. They wouldn't even know what was happening. Continued. They would only think that an invisible giant had punched the big bad wolf. As soon as he finished combination of punches, the holy light on his body doubled in strength. Watched with their mouths to the naked eye as the big bad wolf was blasted into the air, dazzling than the sun. The combined attacks of the 108 hands of magic and the holy light was dazzling. Even though it was dazzling, each of Ronin's arcane missiles was as big as a detail on Alonso's body. Every time Duque unleashed his arcane bishop of the Church of Holy Light who had been fighting for the position of Archbishop wanted to stand up and converged on the huge werewolf. However, and he was horrified to feel the resistance from the holy light. It was a type of disgust and resistance towards impure stared at Duque. It was like an evil creature that wanted to call itself a brother of a holy creature but was coldly and mercilessly rejected. Look. It was not that he reminded her second sister, but he was immediately met with an even greater retaliation from the holy light. Was completely soaked in cold sweat. A golden holy light fell from the sky. Wasn't a werewolf at all. The holy light was like a flame that surrounded his black wings had become incomparably tattered from the violent magical attacks. Feel a heart-wrenching pain on the werewolf's he was drenched in sweat and crawled on the ground in fear, clearly daring to move anymore. Hero that this was not a werewolf at all, regional bishop but a rare high-ranked pitiful gaze before retracting his gaze. If it wasn't for the will of the holy light bombardment, he wouldn't have been able to ascend to the position that was about to reveal its true intentions and desires would be punished severely. Sylvanus, who was forced to transform by slightly and said slowly, "If it weren't for Duque, of an archbishop does not represent authority, nor does it represent glory, would have been killed on the spot. It was a sacred duty." This means that the person who ascends to this position will have to shoulder the heavy responsibility of saving the miserable and suffering people from despair. The skin on their faces started to crack, and they no longer had the aura of the undead. He could not save every good soul that was exposed to the butcher knife of the female demons that burst out of their smaller bodies the ultimate beauty and goodness of the world. If there were dogs and represents the last hope might really want to kill them. What right does an ordinary mortal have to recite the Archbishop's name in despair and bikini attire because of your selfless sacrifice and dedication, who were rare beauties in the eyes of humans, you've done for the people of the world? Unfortunately, they had goat horns that set a benchmark for the goodness of the world of their heads, to bring hope to billions of lives, while the other was purple. At this point, they also had the same iconic pointed tail and goat legs that curved all impurities. In addition, they clearly told Duke and the others their identity. I will ask you one last time. They were the demon sisters that should have inherited the will of the holy light and make your name truly sacred. The two lieutenants of Kill Jaden. A bishop retreated. Almost as soon as they appeared, he was ashamed. The pair of demon sisters gave the adventurer team a show of strength. Exited the hall. They raised their hands and used retreated. Chaos strike. 5 bishops retreated to lose his bearings and spin around on the spot. Apart the other from FAO, who was her slender Bishop of Lordaeron, and Gavin Rad was already bathed in flames. Only Benedictus, in the flames, the Bishop of Stormwind, was left. Lowly mortals, Benedictus neither advanced the first nor retreated of the burning legion's conquest on the ground, letting his face be bathed in the waves of holy light that undulated in the main hall. In pain, he was quietly waiting for the new archbishop to be born. The red-skinned one was naturally the high-grade warlock Elises that humans have selfish desires. Humans had birth. The heroes of Azeroth didn't know who they were, and death, but they could sense that they were extraordinary from the aura there would of this always pair be things one wanted to do. Was there really such a perfect, selfless the Eredar twins and Karzak? Speaking of which, if he was pious, really generous, was he still human? Perhaps this was one of the side effects of him changing history. He was Alonso's most beloved, there would definitely be more and more cases of people breaking in without permission. Calm voice rang but there was no other way. I believe I can do all rowing a boat against the current. If everyone does not if they didn't want to experience the sorrow, I am willing to accept the inheritance of the will of the holy light. They had to be prepared. There was a low commotion around, since Azeroth didn't have the advanced technology and didn't have the power to travel countless light years to kill the burning legion by nationality or unknown corner. The holy light is the ultimate wish of the arrival of the true dawn. If you wasn't Duke's personality to let others do whatever they wanted, light for all people in the world, and then his please stand in front of me. Demon, Wother did not hesitate highly of yourself in my territory. To Alonso's, who was suspended in the air, and knelt on golden light suddenly descended from the void and blasted into the head of Karzak, who was about to climb into the opera house. Swear before the holy light that I am willing to abide by the appeared at the entrance of the opera house. I will use my life to spread the holy light. Boards above the stage exploded, punish evil, and a huge magically constructed giant fell with a loud voice echoed throughout the entire holy light cathedral. Although it was a little strange for a holy knight to be the next archbishop of the holy light, at that moment, the priests quickly accepted a sense of comfort. Yes, after all, this was still half Duke's home ground. Only a truly selfless person had the right being torn apart on that holy position, roasted on the first and only had the right everyone a more in the hearts of the understanding of Duke's huge smiled as he lowered his body and patted the shoulder of his most devout when the curator smashed the ceiling of gratification like a god from the corner of his eye from the heavens. He looked up to the sky and shouted, he displayed an agility that was different from the other puppets. Suddenly, an illusory electric ball of golden holy light front of the Eredar twins, forming a golden crown that looked like a garland. Shouted, this was the holy light's recognition of Eredar twins suffered a small loss. Everyone was stunned. They grunted and took after being stunned for a full 3 seconds. Another loud sound. Priests knelt on the ground. The curators stood firmly between the twins and raised their hands to the sky. Oh, there was still the holy light. This guy was too small. He was standing in the gap between the curator's legs and was completely fine. The moment the inheritance turned his head and glared at Duke fiercely, name became history. Whether the Lightbringer's name became the new holy, Duke ignored whether the Lightbringer's tears flowed down his face as he hugged his something more important. On this day, with Lordaeron your commander-level mechanical construct has every church of light in every city and every small town in every village rang, causing damage. Countless believers knelt on the ground look at the latter part of the notification. Everyone used this method to commemorate the passing of a true saint. Even if Kazak did not appear of the state guest house, probably wet his pants in fear. The holy light cathedral from projection and suddenly said softly, that the Eredar twins were not here at all. It's time to leave. Duke did not know how much combat power the projected avatar had. He estimated that it would at most have 30 to 40%. This was why the curator's second month of the dark forced the twins to retreat. The earth was still frozen, just like how one could not use a ladle of water to penetrate a steel shield. This was the most difficult time of winter. Low-level mysteries were destined to be unable to shake high-level mysteries. In the northern continent of Rotterdam, of the world of corpses of people who had frozen the curator's and starved to death could be seen everywhere. Looking at the confident smile on Duquesne's face, to worry about the Aradar twins actually laughed together. The hard layer of ice made everyone give up on the idea of burying their companions or neighbors. First, the nobles of Rotterdam were celebrating the victory of the one war in the warm castle. Sailor said. In Stormwind, the southernmost part of the continent, adjutant to send 2 avatars just to conquer with Prince William, the bridgehead of the human defense line. Braving the -5 degrees Celsius underestimating our light snow. As there were still remnants of the orcs in the depths of the elven forest, Lang had no choice but to bring more than 500 royal knights with him. Every hero shivered. There was no lack of paladins. It was more like they had been injected with a dose of chicken blood, and a few rangers from the Windrunner fight against a powerful enemy. As they passed by the graveyard outside to launch a suicidal charge, despite knowing that death was inevitable. And William's not everyone was called Wother the Light Envoy. And Owen, compared to fighting to the death with the demons, everyone preferred this kind of counterattack. Before he could get angry, for the alliance, his followers naturally summoned the terrified mayor of Gold's Higher Town. Was the first to rush forward. I'm sorry, your majesty. He was immediately we didn't know you were coming. Queen Saloras. Didn't know? Although Kil'jaeden and Kil'jaeden were in human form, King Leon's words were laced with daggers. The kick was made definitely painful. Even more majestic. Muradin flew out with his heavy armor like a fly ball hit by a baseball bat. Please take a closer look. Muradin's qualities as a top warrior hero were fully revealed. So scared that he wet his pants, he had nowhere to borrow strength from in the air. Lang took a look and found that it was indeed to activate the warrior's before they came back to the elven forest. Their bodies were not in good condition, which was the source of the warrior's strength. But they stubbornly said that they wanted to die in their hometown. With his short legs in the air, during the week of turbulence on the ship, we tried our best to take care of them. He turned into a stream of light and rushed toward instructions. We kept them near the doctor. Not only did he use intercept, unfortunately, but Muradin also grew larger at high speed in the air. Made Lang when he was about to hit Queen Saloras. Hometown had a special and sacred meaning with a height of more than 2.5 meters and a body width of nearly 4 meters. Thousands of years his entire body was covered in a metallic silver color. During the days when Stormwind had fallen, even Lang himself had painfully wondered if he would ever have the chance to return to Stormwind, flying back the land that had been passed down for generations. In the days after the fall, huge silver foot and his people were eager to restore their country. What if he died in battle? And all the warriors who were determined to restore the country died in battle. Next to her, what if it dragged on for 5 or 10 years and they still couldn't recover their country? The curator's explosive attack, which could use the power of lightning to accelerate for a short period of time, the restoration also made Elisa's uncomfortable. Lang and Owen, the Queen was only even the young William could clearly understand the desire but the demon of the warlock citizens, was sent flying especially the elderly citizens, to return to their hometown. Duque instinctively felt that something was wrong. In the cold winter weather, because he saw Elisa's an icy mist that was into the area belonging to the back door of Karazhan. I take out your explanation. Raise her hand, however, and ignite a handful to the place where the civilians gather. Not good. I will use my eyes to witness the results of your work and your loyalty to the kingdom and its people. The curator showed his greatest agility. The mayor, unfortunately, he was still started to form on his face. Elisa's had a sarcastic expression on her face. At this Gold's Higher Town, she actually still had the mood to recite Romeo's lines, and had been burned down by Duque. Many of the trees still looked bare even after more than a year had passed. Intelligent demons. They were either dead or had yet to grow back. Insignificant humans was a challenge to their supreme status. Lang was pleased to see many human spatial barrier that the Titans of creation had set up for Azeroth. A year and a half ago, the Burning Legion would have been easily conquered this world through the portal. And with the casting of this high-grade demon warlock, Father, everyone in the adventure team could clearly feel that an ancient creature was awakened in the distance. Lang was also very surprised. Let me show you my power. He had only seen reports from Duque about how many houses had been built. This guy, regarding internal affairs reports, Lang had always looked at them with a watery eye. Just as the curator controlled by the system, if a tenth of the houses could be built, a huge bone dragon that was bigger than the curator and covered in dark flames suddenly broke through the Duque's report report was completely true outside without a single bit of watery information. Collided into each other without Duke Marcus' new building manual. We were able to build a winter house for every household in the town which had already collapsed a lot. A total into of ruins in the 120 households. On this side, as long as there is a man in the family, at a disadvantage. Even if he doesn't know how to build a house, in front of her under the guidance of a craftsman, after activating can be built by 5 not only did all his attributes skyrocket, Lang and he also didn't suffer from negative statuses such as nothing about building houses, but they had seen how carpenters and stone elements was built so high that it was outrageous. It was impossible to build a house in less than half a year. Muradin was not invincible now. He would still hurt and bleed when he was injured to the warehouse. But there were still 3 pieces of wood were stacked neatly in the warehouse who were doing their best to heal him. That there were grooves on that they couldn't stop Queen Saloras. This is the 2 paladins, the mayor also said, temporarily became I don't healers. Know the specifics. Injecting holy Mr. light Van into the big from the Brotherhood of Stonemasons explained a lot to me. Was enraged. He said that as long as the pillars and beams marked with a specific number are placed at a specific location on the flat front of the Saintess of Chastity, who was about to rush to Kazak's portal be used to make the frame of the house. Blue dragon appeared. The house will not fall apart easily. Then a double layer of wooden planks is prepared in advance, and a huge horn and the 3 mysterious rays that shot out from the void constantly strengthened the strength of the giant dragon. Was stunned. All right, there's no way to use the stove the nether dragon. This can only be built by the more really wanted to eat someone up. Bring me to have a look. While he was busy fighting the orcs, after walking for a short while, had secretly controlled at a commoner's house at the edge of the town. If they knocked on the door jar and Khadgar's reliability, welcomed the king and the fact that the curator was an arcane construct that was difficult to control with dark power. In this era of strict hierarchy, there was already be a blessing for the commoners to not have to kneel when they saw the purified. They would not dare to sit together with the king, angrily even raised her hand and a golden beam of light blasted towards the portal. The man said in unison with his wife and blocked a red ray that came from the void. Are you a soldier on leave? Half of the nether dragon's body was stuck at the entrance of the opera house. There was a rectangular plate on the necklace and began to wrestle which was with the idea that Duque had come up with. At this time, military plate. Everyone on the military side was realized that the soldier's name, place of origin, was a little affiliation, and meritorious service. If you still have any tricks up your sleeves, immediately stood at attention in a standard military posture. And gave me a bad Captain feeling. Joseph Adams of inside the opera house of the 3rd Brigade of the Kingdom was enough to easily suffocate any ordinary person to death. The surging mysterious power tore all the debris in the opera house into pieces. St. Duque, if the opera house itself was not a part of Karazhan and was fixed almost as soon as he finished speaking. Just Kazak's intrusion alone would have been enough to throw the entire building into the sky like a toy, and then it would explode and fall apart. Chapter 668 was livid. The mayor's face turned ghastly pale. Even if Leon had the reputation of being a wise king, Kazak's wild laughter rang through the entire jealous and resentful. First, how could he judge a subject as a saint in front of a king out of the portal? That was a huge demon's claw was if it was in the past that it could be used as an anchor even if they hung all the gossipers in the town on the spot. A pair of sharp red bat wings the mayor already wanted to kneel down and beg for mercy. Panel extended unexpectedly. Finally, King Leon raised his hand and raised his left ferocious face, gesturing for them to stop. However, he did not care about the Joseph, who had already knocked down in fear, enter this space. Nor did he care about the Kazakh that appeared in front of everyone. He turned to Prince William and said, "Even so, today I want to teach you the way had already spread out in all directions like a shockwave. I'm listening." The Windwalker sisters, the little prince, nodded seriously. Whose bodies were relatively light. The first thing you have to do is never be jealous of a minister who is more talented than you. When it comes to war, humans, I am far inferior to your uncle the mighty burning legion. He is the god of war in the hearts of the soldiers. And wantonly mocked Duque and the others. When it comes to strategizing and internal affairs, was also I can't even learn a little bit about your brother, don't you? I only know that under his managed confidence, my people the other heroes did not speak. But Lang shrugged his shoulders and pursed his lips, making a funny expression. Garanin and Edwin if I was the kind of stupid king who couldn't bear to see his minister become a saint, Van Cleef should I behead Anduin and flickering phantom, and then let the people send me to the stake past the queen's side. Before the people do anything, he would inflict the women from the Windrunner family will first skin me alive. But as they did their job, everyone placed their hopes on Duque. I might as well die in Storm Fortress. They were all very strong. After hearing Ryan's words, if it was an ordinary enemy, the ministers, no matter how many even the guards of the Wang family they would not retreat at Ryan's mischievous unfortunately, and they all was far beyond the limits of what mortal power could handle.
When
This
they
was
could
a
not
king who
handle
might
things
not be the
themselves,
most capable,
they could only
but his
pray
character
for a
was
miracle.
absolutely noble.
Duque was synonymous
You must
with
absolutely
miracles.
trust the
Did
ministers
Duque
who are
run
good
out of
to
tricks?
the people,
More or
understand?
less? For
Racking
example,
his brain,
your uncle
Duque could
Andoin
not
and
think
brother
of a good
Duque.
way to deal with
William's
Kazakh.
eyes were
The
filled
others
with
might not
admiration.
know, but Duque
I understand
knew
that
now.
Kazakh was a
Lan's
very
behavior
meticulous
made the
enemy.
mayor and
If
Joseph's
this bastard
family
was
let
not
go of their
killed in
grudges,
3 minutes,
and they also
Kazakh
opened
would
up a
enter a
chatterbox
berserk state
through their
That
mouths.
was a terrifying
Lang truly
state where his
understood
attack
how
power
effective
and
Duque's
life force
policy
would
was.
double and double.
Since there was
Anyone
no
would
need
have
for
to
war
kneel
for the time
before
being,
it. Duque
asked
could run away
Lothar
with
to
his
order
corpse,
the army to
but
take a break.
Aurelia and the others
More
would
than
all
70%
die.
of the
If they
soldiers
could
were given
gather
a
the
break
strength
and
of
were
10
able to
people and
return
gang
to their
up on
hometown
Kazakh,
to participate
they might have
in the
a chance of
reconstruction.
survival.
There were
With
only
the projection
two
of the
requirements for
Eridar
these
twins
soldiers.
still around,
First,
there was no
they had to
chance of
report back to
survival
the
at all.
army after the spring
Duque pulled
plowing
out a
next
red
year.
scale at lightning
Otherwise,
speed
they would
and
be
shouted
treated
at it.
as deserters.
I'm going to
Second,
die. They had to
Alex
wear their
Strassa,
military
get
tags
over
when
here and
working
help
in
me
their
deal with
hometown.
that big demon,
This was to
or
let
you'll have to help
everyone
me
know
collect
that the
my
kingdom
corpse.
had sent them back to
Well,
help. Actually, those were purely Duque's thoughts. As the
with the
deputy
return of a
commander
large
of the
number
alliance,
of able-bodied
the hero
men,
of the
the
alliance,
reconstruction
and the
work
new
was
temporary
able to
guardian,
speed up.
would Duque
At the
do
same
something
time,
so
due to the
uncool?
bountiful
Of course
harvest
not.
of food in the western
actor
wilderness,
Duque had
the people
carry
did
the
not have to
high-grade
worry
warlock
about
Oris,
starving that
who
winter.
was charging over
If that
again,
was all,
while his
Duque's
hands
name would
continued to
not be
attack
sacred
Queen
in the hearts
Selarus.
of the people.
He only
Perhaps
used
the
a small
story
amount
of
of time
Duque's
to say
bravery
to the scale.
in fighting
the commander
Nasserio
of the
was
Burning
something
Legion
that people
in a
killed
country that
Jaden,
worshipped
has sent
martial
Kazakh
arts
and
relish.
his two deputies
But for
to
most
attack
commoners,
Karazhan.
it was
The
just a
acting
topic
guardian,
of conversation
Duke Marcus,
after a meal.
will fight
The
until
only
the
thing
last
that could
moment.
really make them
If
smile
possible,
happily was
please
a stable
send
and happy
reinforcements
life.
as soon as possible.
Originally,
Ever
everyone
since
had
the
already
Eridar twins
prepared
helped
for the
Kazakh
worst. Forcibly
in
opened
history,
the spatial
there had
barrier
never
of
been a
Karazhan.
great
The
migration
surrounding
without
space
a
had become
large number of
unstable,
deaths,
and magic
the weak,
communication
old,
had lost
women,
its
and
effect.
children would die
As for
of
how
hunger,
effective this
cold,
scale was,
or disease
Duque
in the
was not
shortest
sure.
time possible.
Do your best
However,
and leave it to
as a
fate.
transmigrator,
This was
Duque
Duque's
used
attitude.
his modern conventional
the
medical
guardian's
knowledge
authority
to reverse
was only
all
to
of
call
this.
an ancient
The
red
cement
dragon
road
of
that
the
ran
red
through the
dragon
entire
army.
elven
Duque
forest
was
from
very
east to
clear
west
that
provided
one
the
ancient
most
red dragon
solid
was
foundation
definitely
for the
not
transportation
enough.
of
At
supplies.
the very least,
Long
two
before
of the
the
ambassadors
from
from
the
the Sleeping Dragon
Duque
Temple
had
had
Edwin
to take
van
action.
Cleve and Jiri
Otherwise,
Stallman
it would be
prepare
impossible to defeat
Duque had
Kazakh
perfectly
in 3
considered
minutes.
every aspect
Duque
of
had
clothing,
thought of a miracle,
food,
but he did
housing,
not
and
expect a miracle
transportation.
to appear
The
in
first
such
was
a
winter
strange
clothing.
form.
A
There was
small
cotton
window
suddenly
suddenly
popped up,
and
and it had been
occupying
set
a
up
large
early
part
in
of
the
the
western
upper left
wilderness.
corner of Duque's
It allowed
retina.
the dark portal to
Congratulations,
harvest
host.
200,000 kilograms of cotton
Because
in
of
the
the
autumn
connection
Stormwind
between the
in the
guardian
second
and the
year of the
sleeping
Dark
dragon
Portal.
temple.
This
have
was
now
not an
officially
ideal number,
activated,
but it could
debt
allow
collector
most
beats
women and
people
children to live a
mode.
relatively
Before
warm
Duque
winter.
could react,
The people
the
of
system
Azeroth
elf
read
still
the
mainly
information
wore
on the
linen
surface
clothes.
of his brain
In the
and
past,
filled it in
they
this
had to
pop-up
rely
window.
on the fire to warm
Target,
themselves in the
Burning
winter.
Legion's
When had they
high-grade
ever
commander,
worn such warm
Kazakh.
clothes?
Combat
Every
power
person who put on a
evaluation,
cotton-padded
skeleton
coat was
level,
full of praise for this
initial
new winter
estimation
clothing
of
that
skills,
they called
Duque's
Duque's
cotton-padded
Thunderstrike.
coat.
Group
In
Shadow
terms of
Arrow,
food, in addition
soul
to
capture,
the basic black
and
bread,
so on.
Duque
Requests
also
for
added
combat
a large
power
amount of
support
meat.
automatically
The small
set
fishing
to
boats that
elite
could not
ancient
travel long
dragon or
distances
above.
were sent out early
According
in the
to
morning.
combat power
With the help of the
requirements,
mare people,
automatically
there was a
ignore
constant
quick
catch
hit
even in winter.
and
The
downwind
high-fat
hit
whale
mode
meat and
various
various fish were already
specialized hit
ice
mode.
cubes when they were
Your
sent
request
ashore.
has been sent.
Although it was a little
Please
heavy,
wait for the
it was
old
better
driver
to keep
of the
them
dragon
fresh.
race to
It
accept
could be
the order.
transported from Stormwind
Beep,
Port to
beep,
the East
beep.
Elven Forest
The route
hundreds
is
of
busy.
kilometers away.
You can choose to
People
add
could
a tip
add a
so that the
delicious meal
powerful
for their
dragon
families
race will
at
be
an
more interested in
low
your order.
price.
Duke
During the
almost
Great
spat
Retreat,
out a
the
mouthful
people
of blood
had
when he
lost
saw this.
almost all their
You
belongings.
still want a tip?
Duque
This
could
is
not
saving the
always
world.
distribute profits.
You're actually
because
asking
this
me
would
for a
breed
tip?
corruption and
Duque
laziness.
rolled his eyes.
Therefore,
With a thought,
Duque's
he wrote
solution was to
Haagen-Dazs
provide
ice
relief
cream through
in
work.
the tip column. They were paid
A
to
miracle
build
happened.
houses for their neighbors.
The female
They were
driver
paid
of the
to
dragon
transport
race,
food and
Legolas,
cotton-padded
has
clothes
accepted
for the
your
village.
order.
Please
Please protect yourself, she will arrive at any time. They were also paid to make cotton-padded clothes for the women. They were paid to help make javelins. 657. They were paid to take care of the lonely elderly or the sick and disabled. Why does it sound so familiar? Were paid to join the patrols. First reaction was to be dumbfounded. A reward for killing his second reaction was or orcs that invaded. As long as one could work and was willing to work, that covered his entire field of vision. There was absolutely no need to worry about starving or freezing to death. It was as if he was tied to a cross and could not move at all. A minimum and maximum wage system must be implemented, and several profiteers who inflated prices were hanging in his ears made his scalp go numb. Taking advantage of the winter when people could not work, the next year's farmland was distributed to each household early, and creating a path of survival for the adventurer team. Because a large number of the older his actions were stopped by the Aradar twins at the same time, more than 90% of the people had become free people. At the critical moment, those who were newly appointed nobles because of their military exploits were strictly limited to the proportion of fair thigh appeared in front of Duque. The mental outlook of the people of the country was refreshed. This was not only limited due to the protruding buttocks at the base of his group went all the way east. This did not mean that it was the same at Blackwell Farm. Instead, east starting from the thigh, if there was any difference in different places, it was that in Duque's territory, the implementation of various policies was more resolute. Lang met the manager of the East Valley Lumberyard, Duque's vision was a muscular arm with biceps had become the director of a factory even though it was specializing in the production of magic items. It was even more muscular and beautiful than the Windrunner sisters' arms. But the hearts of every citizen were warm. It was not the kind of muscles that bulged exaggerated the arrival of spring, but it had the beauty of a bodybuilder. That was the birth of a kingdom. It was just this one hand that was raised Alonso's fail. A translucent in the spiritual realm dragon wing replaced the rising red curtain, was a saint in the material realm. The entire stage. Because of him, the people lived an unexpectedly good life. Even the raindrops falling on the pond did not sacred in the hearts of the people. The storm-like shadow arrow rain did not even cause a ripple on the illusory dragon to add the word. It was a collision that was even more exaggerated than an egg hitting a rock. The seemingly domineering shadow arrow rain shattered upon colliding with the illusory dragon wing. At the same blink of an eye, there were many cases of people freezing to death all over Lordaeron. Low-tier mysteries were meaningless and the holy city of high-level mysteries. Most of Lordaeron's territory had been ravaged by the orcs in midair. Completely forgetting to retract had been burnt to a crisp by the face of the demon. A pair of scarlet eyes, later known as the Eastern and Western Plaguelands, had been ravaged by the orcs before they had power that completely surpassed him from that petite and almost negligible body. The people could only gather in their dilapidated houses and shiver on the other side. The Aradar to the latest statistics, and leaped there were at least 100,000 people who had died this winter. Between them and hearing this news, King Salatli of Stormguard widened the distance between them and the red-haired woman who just came out. Of Duque's method of building houses, the adventurer team, but the unprepared people of Stormguard had no way of using it. Duque gave him a suggestion, forbidding the people from returning to the Arthi Highlands. Red-haired woman greeted Duque. A large number of people feel that there was in the former Stormwind refugee camp in the hills behind her hills. Her face was full of they had almost perfect living conditions and stored food that could not be carried away by Stormwind. Although it was said to be stored food, why are you here? It was actually the food. I remember that my temporary guardian in a secret place over the years. To the ancient dragons family was forced to leave their territory by Tarina the most particular, but there were many things that could not be taken away. But if since the demon invading was determined to follow Duque, wouldn't it be natural to send in the dragon naturally fell into Duque's hands? Lied through her teeth. Did them a favor and gave it to the people of Burning Legion's Big Three. Looking towards the south from South Shore, it would not be her turn to act according to the rules. Fluttered in the cold wind. Moreover, he suddenly pay an extra price. I heard that people of Stormguard are very particular about equivalent exchange. Forever. Actually, for generations the Red Dragon army is similar. Behind him, hundreds and thousands of warriors of Stormguard shouted. Duque was a little confused. Forever in our hearts. Hey, that not for generations to come. Remember to give it to me on later. On the 15th of February, you must remember standing on the peak of the Redridge Mountains clearly showed a strange determination. Say, what is Duque doing now? Duque could not help but teaching students. I heard he made the little princess of Didn't you notice that you revealed your true nature as a foodie? So at this time, not only Lang, but the ministers around him were also using an ice cream to exchange for the Red Dragon Queen's help. It's because it's the first time I've seen blood. Even though the price Duque was about to pay was probably equivalent to a few dozen RMB before he transmigrated, the Queen did not hesitate at all. Only the young Prince William was dumbfounded. Thunderous roar came from the flaming red lips, not knowing it was a sharp howl mixed with the power of a dragon. It's not what the deafening sound that should have pierced the eardrums that he had inadvertently made things worse. Restrained by the red dragon turned green, and he had no choice but to roar. It was like a venomous snake for yourselves, striking out like lightning. I'm not going to bother about this. In the ears of the bystanders, it was just a slightly loud shout.
Duque,
but in
what
that
the hell are you
instant,
doing?
the Eridar
The Dark
twins'
Portal
incarnations
3
were
February
completely
14th.
disintegrated into spiritual particles by the sound wave and
A certain
dissipated in the
otaku
wind.
with the surname
Unexpectedly,
who had never
Romeo
even touched
and
a girl's
Juliet,
hand back
who were
then,
supposed to
swore
be bosses,
to use his power
did not
to name
disappear
February
on the spot.
14th every
Instead,
year as Lovers'
they broke
Death Day.
free from their possession
Later,
and
because
shouted
a certain
their
man
last
had
lines.
successfully won
Romeo
over the Windborne
shouted,
sisters,
"You killed
he
me,"
shamelessly
and
used
you're
his
so
power
proud.
to bluff King Lang
Juliet
in January.
said, "Oh,
Good
Lang,
knife. This
I
is your
always felt
scabbard.
that the Stormwind
Stab it and
population
let me
loss
die."
was too great.
In the end,
To
the
nurture
two
a
fell.
qualified soldier,
Duque
we must
was
first have a
speechless.
qualified young man.
Spectators from
It will
2
take
to
at
9
least
were
16
speechless.
years for a baby
On the
to
other
grow
side,
into an adult
Kazak
warrior.
felt that something was wrong.
You mean to
Even at
encourage
his
childbirth?
peak, he might not
The
be able to
ministers
withstand
discussed it with me
Alexstras's
before,
attack.
but didn't you say that the
Furthermore,
country
he
could
only
not
came with
provide
half
more
of his
money
body
to encourage
because
childbirth?
of the spatial barrier?
No, we don't
he
need
only
money.
had half of his
We
strength.
can set February
The
14th
Eridar
as
twins were just
Valentine's
projections.
Day.
Apart
Their
from the
deaths
soldiers
were
on
not to be
duty,
regretted.
all soldiers
Even if
can
they
have
were
a day
killed
off.
by the Queen's sound wave.
Why? They would at
Valentine's
most
Day?
lose a few percent
Lang
of their
was
souls.
curious.
Kazak
In
had
order
come in
to
person
fight against the
At
evil
this
orc
moment,
invaders,
Kazak wanted to
countless
cry
good men
himself
rushed
to
to
the
death
battlefield
in the toilet
without leaving a single man
as he
or woman
shouted,
behind. Kazak made
many
his
of
last
them
struggle.
shed their blood on the battlefield, unable to
The
return
sword in
home
his
to
hand that was
reunite
more
with
than
their
10
beloved
meters
girls.
long drew a
Don't you
cold
think it's a
arc in
great
the air.
tragedy?
He used
Seeing
all his
Duque
strength
put
to
one
smash
hand on
at the
his
Red
chest
Dragon
and the
Queen
other
in the
stretched
middle
out
of the
like a
stage.
bard reciting a poem.
The
Disdain
corner of
flowed
Lang's
out
eye
of her
twitched.
golden eyes.
In order to deal
She
with the
walked
tribe,
forward casually,
this can't be helped.
feeling completely
Yes,
defenseless.
But at the end of the
her
war,
steps were so
don't you
light
think we
that
should
it seemed
compensate
like she was
our
going for a
warriors well?
picnic.
At least
It was not like a
30% of our
warrior's
soldiers
footsteps
have
at
to
all.
stay in the barracks
Kazak
or
almost
go out
couldn't
on
help but
patrol
laugh.
for the entire winter.
For the first time,
he
he
saw
saw
to
the light of
maintain at
victory.
least 100,000
Yes,
standing
dragons were
soldiers for a
indeed
long
powerful
time in the
creatures.
future. Their
Think
bodies
about
were
it,
also
tens of
top-notch.
thousands of soldiers
The Red
had
Dragon
been holding
Queen's
back for the
almost
entire
limitless
winter,
healing
and then
ability was
suddenly
also
announced that they
very
can go home to
overpowered.
reunite
But
with their
so
loved
what?
ones.
Kazak
What would
laughed
happen?
maniacally in
The
his
evil
mind.
Duque smirked. How
Well,
much strength
that
can
image
you
was
use
too
in your
beautiful.
human form?
Oh, it was too painful for the
Kazak
eyes.
will be taking
Lang,
the head of the
who had
life
always
giver
been serious,
Alexstrasza.
could not
Kazak
help but
left
face
this
palm.
sentence in his
However,
mind and
this
attacked
era
with
did not
all
have
his
the
might.
3 gods of
The
death
sword,
on earth,
which was already
direct,
faster than the
Okamoto,
mortals
and
and
Jasper.
vision.
These
Actually
3
burst
gods
out
of
with a
death
short
had
but
prevented
powerful
billions
aura
of humans from being
exploded
born.
with a second
There had
acceleration.
long been
The
statistics
sword
on Earth.
cut through the void
Starting
and
from
slashed at the
February
Queen's
after
neck.
10 months,
At this moment,
the number of babies
Alexstrasza
born in
suddenly
December
said,
was the highest.
"My ice cream."
Lang smiled bitterly and turned to look at Anduin, who was also rubbing his eyebrows. Chapter 658.
What do you think?
Lothar could only answer with a bitter smile.
Has the famous
in
Red
terms
Dragon
of military
Queen gone
discipline,
mad?
it's terrible.
Kazak's
but in the
face
long
showed a
run,
hint of mockery.
it's beneficial to
Demons
the country.
were very
so
realistic
I can only
and
agree.
would not be soft-hearted
Anyway,
just
those
because the
brats
other
down
party
there will
revealed the
definitely
flaw.
cheer. No one expected that
on
the
the
speed that was
25th of
already
January,
at the peak of the
Stormwind
peak
could
could
be
be accelerated
announced
at the
a third
14th
time.
of February.
If one
would
had
be
to describe the
Valentine's
speed
Day
before
for
this
this
move,
there
it
would
would
be
be
a
lightning.
total of 3
When
days
one
before
saw the
and
light,
after that.
one's
And the
head would
soldiers
already
could have
be
a
struck
holiday
by
in
lightning.
advance or later.
However,
after 3 times of acceleration, one's perception
that
was
the brave
almost in the
soldiers could
realm of
reunite with
spatial
their
folding.
loved ones after
This
going through
attack
tough
speed.
training and
Even
battles.
Duque, who
In
had
this
absolute
era,
confidence in the
professional
Red
soldiers
Dragon
had
Queen,
very few
could
days
not
off,
help but
and
be
there were
shaken
no
at
fixed
this moment.
holidays.
Be it
Most
demons
of them
or
had
dragons,
served for more
they
than
were
15
all races
years.
with
In
outstanding
ancient
talent.
Rome on Earth,
Success was
professional
99%
soldiers had to
sweat
serve
and
for
1%
25
genius
years
before they
In
could
fact,
retire.
there were many
Before
beings who were
Stormwind,
willing to
more
give
than a
up the
third of the men were
99%,
sent to the
but
army
most
for the
of them
sake of the
lacked the
war.
1%.
Although the war
Those
was
who had the
basically
1%
over,
were
most
already
of the
envied
soldiers
and
had
hated
signed
by
an
others.
oath with the kingdom
Yet
to serve
this
as
fellow
soldiers.
was willing to put in
now that
10
the
times
announcement
the
was
effort
made
of a
without
mortal.
any warning,
Kazak's
the whole
sword was
country
just
cheered.
that fast.
Jaina
Whether it was
arrived
the
in
Stormwind
angle,
by
the
ship on the
strength of the
15th of
4th,
January.
or the perfection
On the
of the
surface,
demonic power,
it was to become
everything was
Lin Li's
impeccable.
disciple.
But in
This
fact,
was no longer a
Lin had
simple
asked
talent.
Jaina to come
Without
over with the
millions of
intention
practice,
of marrying
it
off
was
his daughter.
impossible to have
Just
the power to
accompanying
step
goods
into
and
the
servants
realm of the
alone took up
extraordinary.
3 large ships.
I'm going
and
to
there was
kill
also a team
Alexstrasza.
of 200
Kazak
elite
was
guards.
very very sure.
Yes,
unfortunately,
there were also a
what
few
happened
ceremonial
next made this
officers
great demon,
if
who had
anything really
experienced
happened,
countless battles,
the wedding would be held
dumbfounded.
immediately.
If Alexstrasza used the advantage of her petite body to dodge at the Lin-Li's disciple, causing the sharp slash of the beheader's sword to miss,
foxes,
if that was the
Lin and
case,
Lang,
perhaps he could admit that he had
underestimated
the agility
on the
of the
1st of
dragon
February,
aspect in
a
human
convoy
form.
of 80 carriages
But the Red
arrived in
Dragon Queen
Karazhan
only
along the
raised two
newly built
fingers.
cement road.
2
She
weeks
used
later,
the tips of
it
the
was the
slightly
official
sharpened
Valentine's
scarlet
Day
nails on
of
her
Stormwind.
index and middle fingers
14 to
of
easily
February
catch Kazakh's
Valentine's
terrifying
Day.
attack that
Sitting
seemed
in
to
the
transcend
newly
space.
renovated reception hall
Just by
in
looking,
Karazhan,
it was obvious
Jaina
that this
was wearing a
terrifying giant
well-tailored
sword was
mage
more
robe.
than 10 meters
She
long
felt that
and weighed
something
in the
special
unit
would
of
happen
tons.
today.
Although she had been left hanging for 2 weeks after arriving,
flower petal,
the official announcement that Khadgar gave her today was that Duque was giving her her first lesson, which was several stories tall, and the Queen's standard human body staged the greatest irony on the stage of this Carla Hymn Theater.
Chapter 670.
It felt as if the
What
air
was Valentine's
no,
Day?
The entire
13
space-time
or
had been
14-year-old
completely
girls were at
frozen
the
by
age
this
where they
attack.
loved to dream
Khazak
the most.
wasn't the only one
Prince
who was
Arthas
desperately
was not
trying
bad,
to inhale
but that was
air
all.
into his lungs.
Arthas,
who
who
had
had
yet
yet
and
to
the others
officially
were
step
doing
onto
the same.
the stage of the Alliance,
was compared to the legendary Saint Duque.
It was
who
very
deified
interesting
by the people. Both sides
although
let out
the
the
two
same
were
cry
only
of
4
surprise.
years apart in age.
Soon after,
Arthas was
the
doomed
team of
to be
adventurers
outclassed.
started to pant
The princesses
so low
of
that
this
it was
era
almost
were pitiful.
inaudible.
How
At
to find
this
a
time,
husband was
the
a
Red
common
Dragon
problem
Queen
for all
emphasized,
kings who had
"I want it
princesses.
today." Those who
What do you
were
want?
high would be looked down upon by their own people.
Even Duque,
It was not
as the
easy to
person
be on the
involved,
same
took
level
a
as
full
them,
3
as people
seconds
would
to
always
realize that
associate
this was
them with
connected to the
usurping the
previous.
throne. My ice
In the
cream.
past 1,000 years,
This foodie actually
70%
said,
of princesses
"I want the
had
ice
to be
cream
exported
today."
and sold
Duque
domestically.
pointed at Khazak
The
in
remaining
annoyance.
30%
The
either
faster
grew
you
old
get rid
alone
of this guy,
or eloped
the
with a
more
groom
time I
or a
have to get
knight,
your ice
and
cream.
were then mercilessly
Even though
destroyed
Duque
by
was
the king.
clearly talking and
Only
laughing
one
with
out
the
of
queen,
100 were
Khazak was
successfully
deeply
married
afraid
off.
of the
Jaina had
unparalleled
worried
sense
whether
of
she would
control
be
that
forced to
Duque and
abandon
the
her
queen
magic
exuded
talent,
during their
because a
conversation.
queen who knew
The
magic
queen's
would
eyes
always be
moved,
easily
and the aura
associated
that
with
burst
witches.
forth from her gaze
Duque
seemed
was
to make
ideal.
this big demon
Duque,
feel as
who
if
was
the
a radiant
radiant
moon
earth were
archmage,
collapsing.
would not restrict her
Whether
in
it was
any
the
way
sky
on the
or
path
the
of
earth,
magic. It was all
and
on
Duque's
his side that was
exaggerated
collapsing.
status was
The
comparable
surrounding
to a
temperature
kingdom's
suddenly
fiefdom
rose
and
by more than
uncrowned
20
king.
degrees.
So Jaina did
Even
not
the
feel
air
that
was
she was
buzzing,
marrying down.
as if some
Although
invisible,
she did not know why
mysterious
she went
power
there
was
as a
rippling
disciple,
through the
seeing
entire
how her
theater.
father looked like
The
he was
next
marrying
moment,
off his
cut it.
daughter,
A
and
craft
after
suddenly
receiving
appeared
enough
on the
courtesy
portal
from
around
Khazak's
Khazak's
waist,
city,
she had many
immediately
guesses
an
about
illusory
Duque,
dragon
many
head
of which were
appeared right
unrealistic.
above Khazak's body.
It could not be helped.
The vanguard and
Who told
commander
the
of the
two
Burning
kings to reach a
Legion could only
consensus
watch
while
in
Duque
despair
was
as the
determined to
translucent
resist.
dragon head
All
suddenly
kinds
spat
of
out
wonderful
a terrifying
misunderstandings
dragon's breath
arose.
of over
From the looks
10,000
of it,
degrees.
Gianna was tricked.
Asterisk whoosh.
She arrived in
Asterisk the
Karazhan and
dragon's
was left
breath that
hanging
could
for
burn
2 weeks.
everything turned into a
Fortunately,
huge
she was
pillar of
not
fire
grounded,
and poured
and her
down
best
on
friend
Khazak's head.
Elugia
There were
accompanied
no
her for these
splashes
2
of
weeks.
flames, and there
The
was
two
no
magma,
magma.
under
Under
the
similar
extraordinary
statuses
control,
made them naturally
every drop
close
of
friends.
dragon's breath that
Although
tried
she was
to leave the
surprised
range
that
of the
Elugia
fire
took a
pillar
big
was
detour
pulled
to
back
become a
and
countess
continued to
under
burn
Duque,
the body of
the
this big
revival
demon
of her close
on the
friend's
huge
family
body
still
that was
made
several
Jaina very
stories
happy.
high.
The
When can I
hard
see?
skin of the
Teacher
demon was
Duque?
quickly decomposed
The
by the
Grand
high
Duke is
temperature.
very busy.
The strong
The heavy
muscles
responsibility
rapidly withered,
of rebuilding
and the
the
strong
kingdom
bones
fell
were
on his
charred
shoulders.
black at a speed
It couldn't
visible
be
to the
helped.
naked eye. Most of
In
the
less than
nobles with
5
the ability
seconds,
to manage
this big
had demon
perished
that could
in
turn
that
the whole
shipwreck.
of Karazhan
Furthermore,
upside down.
the task
Was
of
dead.
supplying the army of the blasted lands
Alexstrasza
also
suddenly
falls on the
frowned.
Grand Duke.
Elugia
Damn,
lied
most
patiently.
of this guy's
He was
soul
right.
did not pass through the
Elugia
portal.
could not explain the
escaped.
almost natural
The queen
resistance
spat
that Duque
angrily.
had towards
Duque
Jaina.
did not care too
Duque
much.
had instructed
That's
Jaina
right.
before she
Demons
arrived.
are all like this.
I don't want
They
to
seem
marry
very
Gianna.
fierce.
Elugia,
In reality,
you and Jaina
they
are
good
more
friends,
afraid of death
right?
than anyone
Then
else.
hang her out for 2
Duque's
weeks.
conclusion
As
caused
long
the
as she
people
doesn't
around
leave
him
my
to
fief,
burst into
you can
laughter.
take her anywhere
The
you
queen
want.
raised her hand, and a huge translucent dragon claw appeared in midair. It grabbed Khazak's remains
Moreover,
and pulled
at
the
that
entire
time,
demon
Duque
corpse
was
out of the
hugging her
portal for
waist
her.
and whispering
After
in her ear.
Khazak's huge
This
body
was
went
simply
through the
asking
baptism
her to
of
set up her
incineration.
best friend.
All that was left
However,
were useless
Duque's
ashes
declaration
and a
that
pile
he didn't
of
want to
Khazak's
marry
treasures.
Jaina warmed her heart.
Duque, do you want
Whether
it?
it was logically
The queen
her
did not
vassal
care
should
about these
first
things,
pledge her
so
loyalty to the
naturally,
Grand Duke,
Duque took
or the
advantage of
relationship
it.
between the two of them almost
Why
broke
not?
through the last hurdle.
It's only fair
Both
to kill
drove
the
her
enemy and
to
take
help
the
the spoils
spoils
of
of
war.
Jaina.
Defeating
In the
the
end,
boss
even though
without
she
looting
knew
the
that
corpse,
Duque was actually
that was a
teaching
crime
Ronin
in
in
every
the
sense
depths
of
of
the word.
Karazhan's library,
I'm committing a
Elugia
crime.
stubbornly said that she did not know. Even though
Then,
Duque was
she took
recognized
Jaina and
as
a
a
group of
black hand
followers
in the
to
game in
stroll
his
around the
previous
East
life,
Elven
he would not
forest.
give up on looting
However,
the corpse.
after witnessing
As
a
for the
series
Black
of
Hand,
miraculous
one
policies
had to have
that
the ability
Duque had
to
used
defeat
to
the
help
boss
the
to be
people survive
qualified
to
to
be
be
a
a Black
Hand.
Hand. Jaina's
If you don't
impression
let me
of
lead the
Duque
group,
had
you
increased.
won't even have the chance
He's
to not only a powerful mage and an extraordinary commander, the evil Duque also firmly defended his black hand actions in the game. Did not hide her admiration for Duque. Swept up a small tornado held her forehead and high-temperature ashes at the same time. I'm just following your orders. The excited Duque quickly used the magician's hand to take out a staff with a head that looked like a small drum, and when the Einherjar mage Khadgar came to inform Jaina, Jaina was pleasantly surprised and a little anxious. She had a feeling that this new Valentine's Day was very likely
gave
prepared
a
for her.
one-handed hammer
However,
Skybreaker
repeatedly
to
emphasized
and
that
the
the
two
first
holy
lesson
knights to
tomorrow
discuss
was
how to
practical
split it.
magic,
He
which
then
made
gave the
Jaina
cloak
very confused.
to the Windrunner
Isn't tomorrow
sisters,
the new
and
Valentine's
finally gave
Day
a pair of gloves
set by
called
Stormwind?
Leather of Bad
Jaina
Luck
tried to get
to
more
Edwin.
information from
Finally,
Khadgar.
he found what he
Khadgar
wanted the
shrugged.
most.
So what
Shadow
if it
Eye?
is? I'm only responsible for informing you. Mr.
Chapter
Khadgar,
659.
do you have any suggestions
Although
for
the
me?
shadowy eye was
Even though the
theoretically
intelligent
something
Jaina
that
did
Kazak
not
would
know
drop,
how to bribe a
theory
ghost,
was theory.
she still tried
Even
her
his
best.
Karazhan had been
All right,
ambushed
I
by
can
a
only
demon.
tell you that Master
Perhaps
Marcus
Kazak
has
never
never
been
been
an
an
academic
so
mage.
stupid that he
With
didn't bring
that,
it with him.
Khadgar bowed
Seeing
and
how
left the
Duque
room.
was so
Jaina
interested
was
in
in
this
a dilemma.
palm-sized,
She had no idea what to
and
prepare for the next
moving
day.
eyeball.
The
If
Jordan
Duque
magic
wasn't a
staff
hero
was a
of the
must.
Alliance,
There was a
standing
large
at the
magic
forefront of the
crystal
fight
on the
against
tip of the
evil,
staff, and
anyone
four
would think
small
that Duque
crystals
was a
revolving
sorcerer
around
who
it.
had fallen into
As an
evil
earth
ways.
mage, it was
Aurelia
currently
wanted
the
to
best
say
staff
something
she could
but
use.
stopped. What
For the
troubled
sake
her
of
was what
Duque's
kind of
image,
magic
she
robe
didn't
to wear.
choose to ask on the
Jaina
spot.
almost
She even
subconsciously
secretly
picked up the
pulled her
insight
two
magic
curious
robe.
sisters
The
aside.
moment she picked it
But
up,
while she could
her
hold
pretty
back,
face
guys
turned
like
red.
Muradin couldn't.
After trying it on,
He opened his
Jaina
big
made a
mouth and
sexy
said,
S-shaped
"Hey,
pose in
Duque,
front of herself
what do you
in the
want
mirror.
this thing for?"
She was
I don't think it's
immediately
good.
defeated by
Do you
herself.
want a paladin to hammer
It's
it?
too embarrassing.
Gavin Rad was
It
curious.
was a dress,
but
he
the
was
upper
sure
body
that Duque
only
had a
must have an
golden embroidered
explanation.
bra,
And
but
a golden
Tyrion
belt
stepped
covered the
forward
belly
without
button from the
hesitation.
center of the chest
Duque
all the way
smiled.
to the waistline.
The shadowy eye
Apart
is
from
certainly
that,
not a good
there was
thing,
nothing
but
else
I want to
on her
remind
upper body.
everyone that in the
Her
future,
slender waist
there will be
and
another
smooth
thing
back
called
were completely
completely
exposed
appearing
to
in
the
this
air.
world.
Her
When they
lower
were
body
combined,
seemed more
there
proper,
would be a chance
but upon
to obtain
closer
a
inspection,
blessing staff.
there were long
This would
openings
be a
on
great
both
sides
sides
of her
staff.
thighs.
If you don't trust me, I can temporarily seal this shadowy
Not only
eye
were
in the
her
holy
thighs
light church in
completely
Stormwind.
exposed to the air,
But
but
as
as
long
long
as
as
she
she
will
will
not
not
betray
betray
your
your
trust,
there was a
your
chance that her
excellency.
breasts would be
Benedictus
exposed.
smiled and
After
nodded.
changing no
When
less
everyone
than
heard
10
this,
robes,
they
on the
immediately
14th of
felt
February,
relieved.
Jaina finally
Intentionally
appeared in
or
front of Duque
unintentionally,
wearing a pure
Duque
white,
glanced
past
past
the
the
Bishop
robe,
of Stormwind,
embellished with
Benedictus.
sapphires.
The blessing
The robe
staff
looked very
the most
dignified
sacred
and
thing
elegant,
in a priest's
but the
heart.
exposed
Even as
shoulders,
the years
accompanied
passed
by
and
the
people
brilliant
changed,
golden hair
many
scattered on the
priests
white
still
robe,
placed such a
still
special
showed off the
ethic
unique
staff in the
beauty
corner
of
of
their
their
warehouse.
warehouse.
Fortunately,
It was the
she
best wish
changed.
and memory of
Otherwise,
a generation
if
of
she
priests.
really wore the
But
insight
Duque
magic
knew
robe,
Benedicta's
Duque
background.
might really
The
practice
blessing
what it
staff
meant
was
to
a sacred
make her
treasure
profit every
and
3
Duque
years
would not
and
give
never
it to
lose
this
money.
guy.
In
On
the
the other
gorgeous
side,
Karazhan
the
library,
battle between the
the
two
moment
bosses
Jaina saw
continued.
Duque,
Duque
her heart
had
jumped
everyone help the
violently.
Virgin Mary deal
She
with
was
the
scared
void
because
nether
she saw
dragon,
the scimitar
but he
that her
and the
father
red
gave
dragon
him
queen
and
didn't
Duque's
move.
waist.
Duque,
Very good.
You're not going?
Today's first
Everyone
lesson,
was a little
I
puzzled.
want you to know that the
Duque's
identity
smile
of a
gave
princess
people a
is
sense of
meaningless.
absolute confidence.
I won't be going. If I or Her Majesty Alexstrasza takes action, it will be over in an
Chapter
instant.
671.
In the future, everyone
Shock
might
and
have to
unease
face
froze
all
on
kinds
Jaina's
of powerful
beautiful face.
enemies with strange
Just from
abilities.
Duque's aura and
This is a
gaze,
rare
Jaina
opportunity
knew
to
that
train.
the person standing
Everyone,
in front of her was her
please
teacher,
use your
not her
wisdom
husband,
and courage
Duque.
to deal with this.
What the hell?
Nether void
Duque
dragon
is for real.
Yes,
It was not
please
that Jaina
replace
did
Ms.
not think
Christine
that Duque
first.
would be for
With
real,
her help,
but
in
it's
her
meaningless.
estimation,
What
the
was being
probability was
pretentious?
less than 1%.
This was what it meant
Even
to be
though
cool.
she knew that her beauty
There was
was
nothing
not
more to say
necessarily
about the
better
boss's
than
demeanor
Duque's
of
rumored
not
lovers,
needing him to
the
do
Windrunner
anything
sisters.
for such a small matter.
However, Jaina,
It didn't feel
who
like
grew up
Duque
in a
was a
royal
young
family
man at all.
and was influenced by the nobility, still believed
Instead,
that she would be
it felt
Duque's
like he
only
was on the
choice in
same
marriage.
level as the Red
Now
Dragon
it seemed
Queen.
that she was wrong.
As the guardian
She
of
did not
Azeroth,
know why
he had
Duque looked at
protected
her
this
with
world
such
for
resistance.
thousands of years.
She did not
He
know
was
if
the
it was
kind
her
of
fault
powerful
or something
existence
else
that could suppress
Anyway,
all
at
gods
this moment,
and demons
Duque
with a wave
had
of his
completely
hand.
put himself
Okay,
in the
he was
role
cool
of a
for
strict
3
teacher.
seconds.
Her
When
identity
Aurelia
as a
asked,
princess was
Duque,
meaningless.
what are you going to do now?
Jaina almost wanted to
Duque
refute
had a strange
Duque on the
expression.
spot.
However,
I need to
she
discuss
recalled
the
the
important
importance of
battle
morale
at the
with
Dark
Her
Portal.
Majesty.
Alterac
Everyone
had been
suddenly
destroyed,
remembered the
Silver
ice cream
City
that the
had
Queen
almost
had been
been taken
emphasizing.
over, and
Damn,
Stormwind
it
and
was Storm Guard had been destroyed. The queen. They had only managed to revive their countries. There was nothing they could do. Immediately understood what to be the boss. If there was no country behind her, then the so-called princess was just a meaningless protecting the world of a destroyed country. That big demon called Kazak was not someone they could deal with. Since they couldn't deal with the big demon, there was no kingship in the royal family, and the road to kingship was always of the later generations were now hired by Dakla to work for him. Princess, the queen put her hands on her bitterness and waited for everyone if they were not at her level. Almost as soon as everyone she already knew that her seemingly perfect marriage was actually because she was expelled from the queen almost turned into a husky wagging her tail. Jaina fell silent, and for a moment she had the ice cream of retreating. I only realized that the dragon's cooking skills are terrible when I've had married a while ago,
And all of them had died of
humans and
depression.
high elves are
If she
magical
returned to
races
cultures,
that really know how to enjoy
If
themselves.
she really went back,
Even
was
if she had to
speechless.
find a
The
plausible
queen
reason
shook Duque's
to
arm,
call Tira's
almost
she would
shaking
be in
Duque's
disgrace.
small body.
Just look at
Forget about
Princess
those
Kalia.
idiots who only know how to
she
eat
was
their
killed
prey raw for tens
Otherwise,
of thousands of
the
years.
fact that she was once
Even
the
that kid
fiancée of
is not
Deathwing was
kind.
enough to make
He
King
clearly
Tyrrheus
tasted
want
a
to ban
lot
her
of
for
delicious
life.
food in the
Yes,
Dalagen,
if she
but he
returned,
refused to give it to
Kultira's
me
would
even
not
once.
protect her.
Although she was very
Crasis,
talented
right?
in magic and had great potential,
Legend has it that
she was still
Crasis
far
is
from
secretly
Duque,
in love
who
with
stood
you.
at the peak of
Just
the
because
alliance
I don't
and
give
was
you
destined
delicious
to become a
food,
breaking
you
dawn
erase
mage.
his love for you.
After thinking for a while,
Crasis,
did I do something to make you despair? With the
Duque's
staff
heart
in
was
hand,
trembling.
Jaina bowed
It seemed that he
respectfully.
had broken up
Teacher
another
Marcus,
historical
my
couple.
surname is
Why
meaningless.
did he use the word
in front
again?
of you is only
Well,
Jaina,
anyway,
who came to
Duque
learn the
was from the
mysteries of
Lovers
magic.
Go to Die group.
It was a perfect
Even if he was
and
now a
flawless
traitor
answer.
to the Singles
Duque
Alliance,
narrowed his
Duque
eyes.
decided
He
not
could
to
not
care
help
about
but
it.
sigh at the
Unexpectedly,
astonishing
the
inertia
queen
of
kept
history.
on chattering.
Jaina's
When I was
intelligence and
Legolas,
talent
I
were
heard a piece
indeed
of news.
astonishing. The best seasoning in the whole of Lordaeron comes from you. In just
I
3
didn't expect
seconds,
you to be a
she had
gourmet
realized
supplier.
the situation she was in
If I could
and travel
quickly
back in
found her
time,
position,
I would definitely
Duque
write a
used
book
the
called
identity of
The
the
Gourmet
gourmet's
Supplier
teacher to suppress
and dominate
Jaina,
the
and in the
Dianyang
blink of an
website
eye,
in 2016.
Jaina became a student.
What a joke! From the look in
Only
her eyes,
Duque himself
she had
knew
already
that it
made
was
up her
not
mind
that his
to
cooking
learn
skills
magic
were good
to protect
enough,
herself
but
first.
that the food and
Damn it,
seasoning
she was
methods in
only
this world
13
were
years
too
old.
lousy.
As for
Even the
Ronan,
white bread
who had
that was
experienced
considered
many
superior
battles
by the
but
world
lacked
was
knowledge,
worlds apart
Duque
from the
could
bread
let her
that was
soar
fermented
into the
with
sea of
yeast,
knowledge in the
bulking
Karazhan
agents,
Grand
and
Library.
additives before
As for
Duque
Jaina,
traveled through
Duque
time.
decided to educate her in a way that could very
Because of
likely change the
transportation,
course of her
salt
life.
was not available
All right,
in many
since
places.
you understand,
There
I
was no
won't
butter,
emphasize it
no
anymore.
peanut butter,
and
Duque
they had to
raised
eat
his
dry,
face.
tasteless
I'm different
bread from
every
great
day.
wizard
Duque was
Antonidas.
too lazy to
Strictly
complain about
speaking,
all kinds
he
of
belongs
terrible
to the
things.
academic faction.
At that moment,
but I think I'm
Duque
a classic
became the
example
master
of
of
a
China.
practical one.
At that
I've
moment,
improved more
Duque
than
became
100
the
spell
god
of
of
cooking in
all
the
of which were
spirit of the
adjusted
halberd
in
eaters.
actual combat.
The best
The
actor
number
Duke
of
looked at the
beastmen
queen
that
with a
died by my
sacred aura
hands
and
is
said
also
solemnly,
in the 5
True
digits.
delicacies of the world
Duque
need
was not
time,
making things
love,
up.
and
At this
creativity
point,
to
he
polish
had already
them.
mastered
Things made in
countless
haste
metamagic
will never
abilities.
be perfect.
However,
Alexstrasza,
not every
do you trust
metamagic
me?
ability was
The
suitable
queen
for
quickly
him,
nodded
and
like
not
a chick
all the
pecking
time.
at rice. For example,
Give me 3 days.
the abilities that
I will make
increased mana
Haagen-Dazs ice
consumption
cream
to
that will
increase the
satisfy
power
you.
of spells.
Duque
In the
mourned
past,
in his heart.
when his mana was
Sorry,
low and his mana
Haagen-Dazs
recovery
at
was too
Duque
slow,
may
he
ruin
had
your
to
brand.
use them according to the situation. Now that he had advanced to Radiant Moon, he could
Chapter
use them
660.
whenever he wanted.
Logically
The
speaking,
system was
there was a
adjusting
reason
Duque's
for
spells
everything
all the
success.
time. This
So
was how
big
there
that
was
humans
Duque,
dominated
who
the
was
earth.
invincible in
So
group
small
attacks
that
on
the
the
success
battlefield.
of Haagen-Dazs
After
ice
killing
cream,
a lot,
although
there would
Duque
naturally
always
be a
felt that
murderous
Haagen-Dazs
aura.
was too
It
sweet.
wasn't that there had to
Many
be vengeful
people in
spirits
previous
haunting
world
that
would
person,
easily think
but
of
it was
it
a
when they
kind of
thought of the best
indifference
ice
to
cream.
life, even
Of course,
cruelty. It was impossible
just
for a
stood there,
half-transmigrator
and under the
like
pressure of his
Duque
aura,
to make an
Jaina
identical
couldn't help
ice cream
but take
under
half
the
a step
Haagen-Dazs
back.
brand.
And
Duque
Duque
took a
biggest
big step
advantage
forward.
was that no
His
one
heavy
in
footsteps
Azeroth had
weakening
ever
the pride
eaten
in
an
Jaina's
authentic
heart.
Haagen-Dazs.
Duque suddenly
If this
asked,
wasn't a war-torn
actually,
world,
His Majesty
Duque was
Rim doesn't
absolutely
mind
sure
me
that he
being
could
made a
become the
king.
richest
Do you
person
know
in this
why I
world with
didn't?
just his
Jaina
transmigrator
found
knowledge.
that she actually
Don't
didn't
ask
dare
why
to breathe.
Duque knew how to
I
make
don't
ice
know.
cream.
Forget
Forget
that there were
Legion
no
has already
female
begun
creatures
to
in
move
the temple
against
of the
world
University of
Azeroth.
Technology.
From Sargeras
There was only
controlling
one
Medivh
small
shop
shop
within
within 3
kilometers
kilometers
of the university.
Jaden's deputy
Not only did they
attacking
sell
Karazhan
pineapple
not
beer,
long ago,
they even
in
dared
just
to
3
refreeze
years,
the melted
the
ice
world
cream
of
after
Azeroth
the power
has
was cut
experienced
off.
2
In
major
a fit of
crises
anger,
of destruction.
Duque and the
Jaina
other
hugged
animals
her
didn't have
staff
ice cream to make
and couldn't help
themselves.
but nod.
So they remembered.
I have foreseen
Don't
that
ask
the
why
evil
they
power
ate
that
ice cream in the
transcends
middle
the
of
mortal
winter
world will
Didn't
descend
they see
rapidly.
that the person who was
in the
drooling
face
over
of
it
the
was actually
terrifying
a
power
super
of the
female
demons?
dragon?
Worldly
Her stomach
power
was
is
full of
meaningless.
stomach fire.
So what if it's as
Dragon
powerful
breath.
as Rotterdam?
How could it not
Maybe
be hot?
within 10 years,
That wasn't a problem at
Rotterdam
all.
will become history.
and the insidious great Rotterdam will in order to maximize the effect of nothing, Duque said had specially carried out a contrast and she had battle. Goosebumps. So, while the really 9 heroes of the destruction of the death downstairs, Duque and Alexstrasza slipped to the rooftop of Karazhan. She really wanted to refute Duque and say that it was a ridiculous rumor. Duque got what he wanted. However, after Prince City had fallen, the rooftop of Karazhan Broken Ridge had been destroyed. The queen sat cross-legged on the fence, had been demolished by the wings of death. Smelling the increasingly rich fragrance in the 100 years ago. She was so moved that she was about to cry. On the left was a whole roast cow. Fraud Duque continued. The red dragon had the only thing that can protect the world of Azeroth from the hands of the demons is the same power after that removing the internal organs and peeling off the skin. The one who can give you a sense of security is not a man, the cow's body on a special iron frame, and then put various spices into the cow's body. Remember, the only thing ever since he made magic, Duque had invested at least 100,000 gold coins
Even now,
in seasoning.
she couldn't believe
he didn't
that
have
this
cumin
was said
anymore,
by the person
but he
who was
still
supposed
found
to be
a
her
lot of
husband.
similar things.
However,
she had to admit that if even the kingdom couldn't be trusted, and used only a dozen hands of magic to carry the iron frame to a special pit for roasting Jaina's wrist, and a strange that was specially made around roasting the whole cow looked like a tin can. It was built with bricks and was about 4 meters long, distance 2 meters wide. She was shocked to find herself in a world of ice in the pit and snow, and at the bottom of the pit was a blazing charcoal fire. As long as the beef was roasted over a charcoal fire for a few hours, the color of the beef would slowly turn golden. It's so cold. The golden color signified a bountiful harvest. Even though she was a mage who specialized in ice magic, Duke had asked she couldn't help but shiver when she suddenly came from the warm Karazhan living room to the cold north. I have plenty of time. She was wearing for a dragon that had lived for more than 20,000 years. Mid-February, what she lacked, and the harsh winter had yet to recede. But new things. The mountains and trees in the distance were all covered in white from Earth that couldn't be found in this world. There were very attractive to these guys who had no experience in surviving in the wild. The food supplier she was at a loss. Went back to work. Jaina was a little confused. Fake Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Simple ice cream couldn't satisfy the queen, in Jaina's or to be more precise, Duque's appetite. Gave Jaina a shock. What Duque was going to make was red bean ice cream. The sleeveless design of the moon system elf to pick out the impurities in the red beans. She couldn't help but almost instinctively hug her other arm and the red beans in cold water for 1 hour. Northern mountainous area of the red beans using the method of boiling the water 3 times and braising cold 3 times. Boil the water 3 times. The clever Jaina suddenly thought of for half an hour, and her little face instantly turned pale. At the same time, he broke the first eggs lesson into a small basin. Is survival. He couldn't find a beater in a hurry in this world, but it wasn't a problem for Duque. Incomparably terrible. Rotated the hands of magic in the basin at a high speed. When the color became slightly lighter, you can survive in the tearful woodland infested with the eggs for 24 hours. Slowly added milk and sugar. When Jaina heard this, she and Alexstrasza slowly heated it up with letting a little girl like her, chatting about trivial matters independently, and stay in the dangerous forest of orcs for 24 hours without winter clothes, cornflour, food, unfortunately, or any heating equipment. No cornstarch in this world. Wasn't this bullying? Duque really didn't know how to make it in the corner of Jaina's beautiful ground cornflour. That pitiful appearance. It wouldn't be a problem to fool people. Made Duque's heart soften. He added the cornflour was still the best actor until it was uniform. Duque pretended to be magnanimous and asked, "This time, are you more viscous?" He heated it slowly with a low fire and put it into a container. Flashed usually, into long what followed was a long cool down. So Duque was just giving me a show of strength 4 to 5 hours to freeze. Duke waved his hand. Unfortunately, and after a short incantation, dragon queen, an illusory portal as tall as a person gulping down her saliva just as Jaina was about to step in, resigned himself to his fate and used as if she had been hit by a petrifying spell. The great radiant moon mage Duque used his unparalleled control of magic to speed up the cooling of the ice cream as much as possible. Without damaging its quality. As long as you promise to tell His Majesty Proudmoore that you don't want to learn half an hour later, when the roast beef and the ice cream were almost done at the same time, and be your princess and the other 8 arrived on the roof under Khadgar's lead. But each word was like a knife that cut into Jaina's heart. Aren't bad. It wasn't that no one had reminded Jaina that Duque didn't like her and didn't want to marry her. He even reached the roof. He didn't even want to take her as his disciple. However, what is this fragrance? Smoke glove? Then even Antonidas was envious of made the young Jaina forget about it in her excitement. Give it to me. Now can you give it to me? That it was true. I beg you. That's right. Hurry I can go give it to me. But what about after I go back? Any man who heard that sorrowful voice came under Duque's command in the name of if it had been anywhere else, but he was chased away because he couldn't endure the tough training. After smelling that rich fragrance, her father didn't the Windrunner sisters had this kind of humiliation. The group of fellows in the charged forward at the speed of a charge. No Archmage and Dalajan would accept her the warrior's charge skill. Thinking of this, Jaina's mouth was full of bitterness. What did dwarves love the most? Did she have a choice? Delicious Jaina food bowed and impeccably and used a respectful tone. Bastard Muradin. No, even the other heroes who had experienced a tough battle were tempted by the situation your teachings. Although no one was survival in the wild is very helpful for stamina and energy, then I accept your trial. What could be more surprising than a delicious roast beef and I hope you can come and pick me up after a victory. The group promised to be on time in 24 hours.
Then, when they realized that the great red dragon queen was eating the roast beef without a care in the world, that I can't handle,
up a spoonful
do you remember
of ice
your
cream.
brother Drake's coming of age ceremony when he was 16?
That's right.
Your father only gave him a dagger and pushed him into a
but these
pool with an adult shark
in the food desert of
Jaina
Azeroth
had never seen it before. When she was a child, she grew up listening to the great achievements of her father and brother. Only when she was a little older did she understand how on the battlefield knew the value
in the
of
face
good
of
food.
a shark's attack
The
in the
hardship
sea,
of marching
the only
was
way
not
to
something
survive
that
was to use
outsiders
the dagger
could
to stab
understand.
the shark's nose
Walking
the
in
moment
dense
the shark
forests,
pounced.
if they had
Then
enough
use the
energy,
dagger to
they could
twist the
shoot
shark's
some
head
prey
so that the
and have
body
some
could
to
escape
escape
the
the
shark's bite
When
range.
marching to places like
Otherwise,
the burning
if the
flames
shark's
or the
sharp
cursed
teeth
lands,
grazed the body,
the experience was
skin would
enough
be
to
torn
make people
open on
want
the
to die.
spot.
And the
It was
wound
not
might
that
even
there was
get
no
infected
prey,
and die.
but would anyone
Jaina's
dare to
whole
eat those
body was
monsters that
trembling,
had been
but after
corroded
a
by
few
dark
seconds,
energy?
she finally
Moreover,
calmed down and
roasted
bowed
meat
again.
could not
I
possibly
understand,
be as
teacher.
delicious as
May I
Duque's
ask one
whole
last
roasted
question?
cow.
What else was there
Did
to
you
care about in
experience
war?
something similar
It
back
was
then?
already good enough to stay alive.
Then I have no
Did
problem.
they not see that
What
even
you can
the
do
crown
back
prince
then,
of
I can
Cordillus
also
had
do.
died? Other
Jaina's
than the
blue
Dalajan's
eyes
pharaoh who
flashed
could
with
not
determination.
eat well,
Very
and
good.
would not work if their
Duke
babies
said
were
and
not
disappeared
happy.
in front
the
of her
entire
with the
alliance,
teleportation.
from soldiers to
It's so
generals,
cold,
did not care so
Jaina
much.
exhaled a
But this
mouthful
did not
of white
mean that they
fog
had
and
realized
realized
that
that
she
good
had to
food.
find some clothes
Kings
first.
and nobles would carry
Otherwise,
spices
she would
in
freeze
private.
to death in
Yes,
less than an hour.
it was something from
not to mention
Duque's side.
24 hours.
At the height of
The
the
only
war,
good thing
the
was that she was
Alliance had a
wearing
saying about the
standard-made
golden
shoes
plant.
today and not
It meant
high
that
heels
Duque's
for banquets.
spices were more
At least
expensive
when
than gold.
faced with bad mountain
Of course,
roads,
it was
she
not
would
because
be
Duque
so
was
desperate
so
that she had to
expensive,
take off
it
her
was
shoes
because
to walk.
of the
In a
unscrupulous
cave on the
merchants.
mountainside,
The big
500
shots of the
meters away,
Alliance naturally
looking at
had
the
Duque's
Duque's Jaina
supplies,
in the snow,
but the nobles below
a
were
beautiful
not
elf
so
combed
lucky.
her golden
This
hair
was
that
where
had been
Duque
messed
was
up by the
smart.
wind. Others
She turned
profited
back
from
and
war
smiled.
and were criticized
Duque,
by
you're
everyone.
really
But when
cruel.
Duque made a fortune,
You think so
no
too?
one could complain.
Aurelia.
Because
Aurelia
in terms
laughed.
of armaments,
This is
Duque
too
was
cruel for a
absolutely
14-year-old
selfless
girl.
and did not skimp.
Don't you know?
But food
Today
and
is her
spices were not
birthday.
necessities, right?
Jaina's birthday
They were luxury
is
goods,
Valentine's Day,
right? What
Yes,
the hell is this?
those unscrupulous
Duque
merchants
really did not
mentioned
know
above
if this was
were
how
all
it was in
secretly
the
Duque's
original
people.
history.
You
Or
could choose
if it
not
was
to
because
buy.
he had
No one would
transmigrated
force
that
you to
he had
buy.
become like this.
It was
just that other people ate well and drank spicy food, while you could only eat
she could
tasteless
hate if
white
she
bread.
wanted to.
Don't blame
It was
other
better than her
nobles for looking
following
down
the
on
original
you.
trajectory
Faced
of
with
becoming
spices
a
that
girl
were
who
inflated
sold
by
her father.
unscrupulous merchants,
Duque pulled
good
Aurelia
nobles
into
would
his
cry
arms,
and dig
feeling
into
the
their
female
wallets.
elf's warmth.
After fighting a big
Jaina
war
is
against the
undoubtedly
beastmen,
a true
the nobles'
genius.
wallets had
She
shrunk,
has the talent
except
to grow
for Duque.
to become a breaking
As for
dawn
how
wizard.
much money Duque
But there
had,
is no
he did
lack
not
of
know.
geniuses in this
After
world.
10 million,
And only
Duque
one in
stopped
10,000
counting.
can reach the
All right,
peak in the
I'll
end.
set a small goal.
The female
Before
elf's eyes
Nazilla
flickered.
rise. Because
I'll earn
geniuses
100 million
all
from
die
him
from
first.
their own pride,
At this time,
laziness,
because
or
Corazon had
misfortune
isolated
on the path
part
of
of
the
growth,
space, there was no cold
That's
wind
not right
blowing
either.
in. So it
I just
became
don't
a
want her
very
to
pleasant
become
thing.
that terrible
The
woman
group of
who sold
heroes
her
ate
father
barbecued
and the
meat,
Alliance.
drank wine,
Below,
and looked at
Jaina
the
turned
beauties eating
into
ice
ice
cream
in the
in the
cold
middle
wind.
of the ice and
Suddenly,
snow. She was pleasantly
Actually,
surprised
Duque's
to see
ice
smoke.
cream wasn't that
The
amazing.
rising smoke could
According
be seen
to his
clearly
standards,
even
it
from
was about
several kilometers
60%
away of the original version. The fragrance of the milk was enough, and the taste of the red beans was also not bad. The white sugar added was not
Chapter
refined enough,
673.
but it was still passable. Someone's there? Looking at the rising
The biggest
smoke
difference
drifting
was
into the
the
distance,
smoothness of the
Jaina's
ice cream.
heart was ignited
The enjoyment
with a
of
raging
top-notch
flame
ice
of hope.
cream wasn't
That's
something
her
that Duque's
life-saving
imitation
straw
could compare
the
to.
moon cloth was
However,
very tough.
the ladies
and
didn't
Jaina
know.
could not tear
They
it to make
only
herself
knew that
more
the
agile.
snow that they had seen
She
a
could
lot
only
of could
pull
also
the hem
become
of
a
the robe that was
delicacy
almost
after being
touching
condensed.
the ground to her thighs.
One by one,
because
the
she
top
did not
beauties
know
in
how to tie a
Azeroth
knot.
stretched
She could
out their
only hold the
soft
staff in
tongues
one hand and
lick
the
the
robe
ice
in the
cream
other
without
as she
being taught.
hastened her pace.
The scene was
The
really
cold wind
pleasing to
seeped
the
into the
eye.
robe, and
Accompanied
Jaina
by the
felt
white,
even colder.
half-melted ice
Bastard
cream,
Duque, the seductive
Bastard
little
Duque,
tongue faintly
how dare
swam
you
between
treat me
their
like
bright
this?
red lips.
It's fine
Because
if you don't want to
even
marry
Alex
me,
Strass's
but if
human
you
form
do,
was based
I
on the
swear
template
I
of
will
the
take
high
revenge
elves.
on you.
Everyone saw
However,
the four
no
elven
matter how
beauties
much she
squinting
cursed in
their
her heart,
long and
it was
charming
useless.
phoenix eyes. In the
Stretching
winter
their
forest,
eyebrows that were
there was
longer than
nothing
human,
but silence.
and enjoying the delicacy.
There were
no insects,
if they didn't
no
know that
birds
this had
chirping,
nothing to do with
other
flirting,
than the sound of the
anyone
wind
would
that
mistake it for
sounded
some
like the
kind of
wailing of
temptation
ghosts.
or invitation.
There was no other sound.
The men weren't too
At
interested
first,
in ice cream.
Jaina was still
They
wondering if she
recognized
should
it
move
as a
forward
delicacy,
cautiously,
but they were
the
more
cold
interested
wind
in
was
the
like a
roast
whip
beef.
lashing at her back and her
Muradin and the two
exposed
paladins
arms.
were eating
If she
meat
did not
and drinking
rub herself,
wine,
a
while
thin layer
Benedictus
of
chatted
frost
with
would
Theon
form
from
on
time
her
to time.
arms in just 2
Edwin
minutes.
and Ronan were
Jaina
both
ran
Duque's
wildly
subordinates,
in the rugged
and the two
forest.
tactfully went
Because
to
she was
decide to
not
chat.
agile enough.
Only Duque,
She fell down
the
no
three
less than
Windrunner
5
sisters,
times. and the Red
However,
Dragon Queen
her
were left
instinct
together.
to survive was
Duque
urging
didn't
her
have
to
that many
continue running.
scruples.
Closer.
One was
Closer.
the golden thigh
It was
of the
getting
dragons that he
closer.
had to maintain
She
a
saw
good
the
relationship
smoke
with.
drifting into the
Two were
distance,
his
getting
own women,
thicker and
thicker.
Savannah's.
What a
who
big
was both
fire.
his sister-in-law
Is this a
and
bonfire
sister-in-law.
party? Duque
But it's
didn't
broad
mind.
daylight now.
Unlike the foodie
Jaina could
Alexstrasza,
already see the
Aurelia
road.
seemed to be a
It was
bit
a
upset
forest
that
path
Duque
that the
didn't bring out
villagers had
such
walked for
delicious
countless
food
years.
earlier.
Although
When it
it
came
was
to
not
food,
comparable to the
Aurelia
Daligin's
gave in to the
perfect
queen,
fancy
but her
tiles,
words made
nor
the queen
could it
choke.
compare to the
It's
so-called
fine, your
cement
majesty,
road
more.
that traversed
I'm
the
by
entire
Duque's side
elven
anyway.
forest. It was
When we
many
sisters
times
wanted,
better than the
Duque
bumpy
can make
forest
it for
filled
us.
with tree roots
The
and
queen's
gravel.
eyes were plaintive.
Finally out of the
Sasha,
forest,
on the other hand,
in
didn't
front of
pay
her
any
suddenly
attention.
opened up. Seeing
Hello.
Duque looking at her,
Is anyone here?
Sasha returned a slightly
Jaina
seductive
immediately
look.
covered her
She
mouth
glanced
with
at
her
Duque
empty left
in a
hand,
seemingly
and
calm
tears
but
of
flirtatious
panic
manner,
flowed
then gently
uncontrollably
licked
from
the
her
ice
eyes.
cream on her seductive
Someone.
red lips.
But they were all dead
She narrowed
people.
her eyes
In front of
slightly
Jaina
and began
was
to
a hellish
concentrate
scene.
on melting
This
the
was
ice cream in her
obviously a
mouth
village
bit by
that had
bit.
been attacked not long
Savannah's
ago.
was extremely
Because it was
conflicted.
winter and the wind was
She
against
looked
the
at
wind.
Duque,
Jaina
who was both her
couldn't smell the
brother-in-law and
stench
her
of rotting
brother-in-law.
corpses.
He wasn't
But
particularly
now
good
her
at fighting,
vision,
but
smell,
every time
taste,
he did something
hearing, and
earth-shattering,
skin were all
at the age of 17,
he
giving
led
her
the
a shock
entire
that
alliance
exceeded her
and
psychological
great
limits.
battle after
The
another.
burning house
Not
still
long
had
after
embers
he
that
killed
had not been
Nasario,
extinguished.
he came to
and
borrow
black
the Red
smoke
Dragon
billowed
Queen's
out of
hand
it.
to kill
The
a
gate
greater
that had
demon.
been forcefully
If she
smashed
really
through
wanted
was
to
a
choose a
huge
man
human
who was
figure.
not inferior
There were
to
also
Duque,
some
she
scattered
really
food on the
couldn't
ground.
find one.
It was a mess
However,
everywhere.
as the most
Because
rebellious
of the
the
ice
Windrunner
and
sisters,
snow,
every
Savannah's
corpse
was
maintained the
disdainful of her
appearance they had when they
sister's
died.
private proposal
Their
to get
fear,
close to
anger,
Duque
and
unwillingness before death were all frozen on their faces.
I'd rather be single than make do.
This ha-something root ice cream is
There was
really
still
delicious.
a small piece of green
On the other
skin
side,
in the loyal
the
domestic
queen had
dog's
already
mouth,
turned her
but the rest of the
resentment
body
into
below the
appetite.
head had been
Or
eaten
perhaps
clean by
her
the
taste
battle
buds
wolf.
had already
The
been
old man
destroyed
who
by the
raised his
terrible
pitchfork
taste
to
of
protect
raw
his
meat
old
and
boss
taste
had
his
his
barbecue
head
for
crushed.
10,000
The father,
years,
who had clearly
she
been
was
chopped
already
in half,
overjoyed when
used
she
the last
sneaked
of his
into
strength to
Rotterdam
reach
last
out
time.
and grab his wife
Now
and
that she was
son.
eating this
The mother
delicious
who was
food,
hugging her
she was
child
so
had half
happy
her
that
body
she cried
smashed
by a heavy
Ooh,
weapon. It's so
a
delicious.
baby
Who had been gnawed
I've
by an
lived
ogre
for more
until
than
it no
20,000
longer looked
years,
like a human.
and this is the first time
We're
I've
all
eaten
done by the
something
orcs.
so delicious.
Jaina saw an
Woo-woo.
orc corpse
The queen
covered
had
in
actually
wounds.
learned the
Beside
master
the
level
corpse
ice
were
cream
7
eating
or 8
godly
fallen
skill.
militia.
It wasn't
It
just
seemed
her
that this was
exquisite
the
ice cream
only
eating
achievement
skills,
of the
but
village's
also the
militia.
intoxicated
The lack of
expression
food
on her
forced the
face as if she was
Warsong
about
orcs
to
hiding in the
orgasm.
depths of the
It gave
forest of
Duque a
Carisful to
strange
attack
sense
the
of
human
comfort.
settlements in the
Perhaps
forest.
every chef hoped
She could
that
no
their
longer
customers
control
could
herself.
truly enjoy the fruits
Blurg,
of their
blurg.
labor.
This
The
wasn't
bread,
some kind of
pastries,
acting.
and
Duque
fragrant
had
milk
once
that
seen
she
a
had
set of
eaten
spirit
early
of
in the
drugs.
morning were all
vomited
no,
out by Jaina.
spirit of halberd
For the
eating,
first time in her
manga.
life,
The women
Jaina
in it
felt
would feel
so
numb all
uncomfortable.
over when they ate
The churning
something delicious.
feeling in her stomach
At that
made her
time,
feel like she was
Duque
going to
thought it was
vomit last night's
exaggerated.
dinner. He didn't think
After
that he would
vomiting for a
actually
while,
see it in real
until
life
her stomach
now.
was empty,
This was
until
an
she felt
acting.
the coldness
The
of death again.
intoxicated expression
Jaina
of the
realized that
beauties
if she
in
did
front
not
of
do
him
something,
was the
she
truest
would very
reflection
likely
of
become
their
a
feelings.
cold corpse like
Suddenly,
them.
a system
I have to do
notification
something.
appeared. Jaina told herself,
Congratulations, host.
resisting the
Your
nausea
reputation
and
in the
discomfort,
Dragon Slumber
Jaina
Shrine
stood up
is
and
now
forced herself
worship.
to enter this shuraba to find anything that could help her survive. The orcs took almost everything that could be eaten. They rudely broke into every room and smashed open the basement of every house. Because of their huge size, they burst every door, turning every house into ruins full of holes. Fortunately, Gianna found 2 thick blankets in a cupboard under the stairs, and then under one of the beds she found 2 hunks of brown bread that she had never looked at before. She did not know how to make a living with flint, but fortunately, she was a qualified earth mage. She came to a messy basement, piled up the wooden blocks, and started a fire with a fireball spell. Then she put a blanket under it and wrapped herself in it. It was a little warmer this way. After an unknown amount of time, she could no longer hold back her hunger. Finally, she boiled snow water in an iron pot and cracked open the black bread. After soaking it in the water, she forced herself to swallow it. She would probably never forget the terrible taste for the rest of her life. In a daze, she fell asleep. She was woken up by the noise. Is anyone here? Is anyone still alive? The standard Lordaeron accent was not something the orcs could imitate. Jaina rushed out of the cellar in surprise and saw a group of Lordaeron cavalry. Praise the holy light. The leader was obviously a holy knight. He had already given up
up hope for this destroyed town. He did not expect to find a survivor, and it seemed like it was the first noble lady. Oh, thank you, Ancestor Soridon. Jaina was also very excited. She had long forgotten about surviving for 24 hours. "How did you?" Before she could greet him, Jaina suddenly heard a strange, small sound. Whoosh, less than half a meter in front of Jaina. A cavalry beside her was shot in the neck by a wooden spear that came out of nowhere. The impact of the spear was so strong that Jaina watched in shock as the tip of the spear entered from the left and came out from the right. It almost broke the cavalry's entire neck. Looking at the tilted head and feeling the warm blood from the wound on the cavalry's neck, Jaina finally could not help but scream. "Ah!" The holy knight raised his shield and blocked another spear. He shouted, "Orcs!" This was Jaina's first Valentine's Day in her life, and it was also a bloody Valentine's Day. Chapter 674. Countless orcs suddenly jumped out of the snow outside the town. They shouted in the orc language that humans could not understand, and roared as they charged towards the Rotterdam cavalrymen that consisted of only about 60 people. Apart from the orcs, there were also many slender, white-skinned frost trolls. If not for that round of spear-throwing just now, the cavalry could have broken out of the encirclement with their warhorses. Unfortunately, at least 70% of the warhorses were pierced by the spears, and they neighed in pain in a pool of blood. The remaining cavalry had no choice but to use their warhorses as cover and form a circular formation to resist. If it was a battle on the battlefield, 100 orcs and trolls against 60 highly mobile cavalries, the outcome of the battle would still be unknown. When the cavalry was forced to become infantry, and had to use the smaller kite shields of the cavalry to form a circular formation, the outcome was decided. Jaina was sprayed with blood, and she was completely stunned. Some people would scream hysterically in the face of danger. They could not do anything, and would even disturb their companions, making a mess of things. Some people would show extreme survival instincts at such a moment. Like a drowning person, they would grab onto anyone they could grab and crave for a chance to survive. There were also some people who would become calm and decisive after extreme panic. There was one last type of person who could guide their companions out of a predicament that would lead them to death. The last type of person was extremely rare, and people often called them generals. It was obvious that Jaina Proudmoore was a natural commander. In just a second, Jaina came to her senses and shouted, "Go to the church. The church is made of stone." The paladin who was the leader suddenly understood what Jaina meant. Jaina's judgment was correct. If they did not have suitable defensive measures, the 60 of them would basically die in a single charge from the orcs. Hiding in the cellar was useless. Firstly, the cellar was not that big, and secondly, the orcs' demolition ability was beyond the imagination of most people. The orcs did not even need to use hammers to demolish houses made of ordinary bricks and wood. They could just knock it down with their arms. The so-called defense of a fortified position did not work on the orcs at all. The church was different. For some reason, the church in this town was made of blue stone and was rather sturdy. "Go. Listen to this lady." It would take the orcs at most half a minute to rush from the outskirts of the town to the town. They would be able to get there in a daze. Jaina's shout was definitely a life-saving move. The cavaliers of the Rotterdam kingdom supported their teammates and almost rushed into the church in the middle of the town before the orcs surrounded them. Blarg! Jaina wanted to vomit again. The church was a sacred place for the people of Lordaeron. People would naturally come to the church to seek salvation in times of danger. Unfortunately, the orcs had turned this place into a cruel slaughterhouse. Even though the corpse was already frozen, the smell of blood that had just splashed onto Jaina's body stimulated her sense of smell. None of the cavalrymen blamed this seemingly delicate young lady because she had already saved their lives. Some of the cavalrymen dragged the injured comrades deeper into the church, while the uninjured cavalrymen quickly formed a two-layered shield formation at the entrance of the church, which could accommodate 4 people abreast and was as tall as 2 men. "Thank the holy light. Thank you, wise lady." The orcs were still aggressive, but compared to setting up a formation in the middle of the town, which had a complicated terrain, the church that only needed to defend the front door was simply a holy land. There was also a side door made of blue stone that could only allow 1 human to pass through. 2 of them were enough to guard the door tightly. The orcs immediately launched an attack on the human soldiers of the church. They smashed their huge hammers over, and even with the defense of the shields, they easily broke the arm of a cavalryman. As the price, the orc died in the next moment after being stabbed by at least 7 swords of the knights. The tragic battle was going on, and the cavalrymen were constantly injured and dragged into the church by their companions. However, there were more orcs who had fallen. The cavalrymen, who were obviously veterans of the war, were extremely brave. In just 5 minutes, they had killed more than 30 orcs, and only 7 of them were lightly injured, while 3 of them were seriously injured. However, there were more orcs outside. The green heads were densely packed, forming a surging green ocean. It seemed that there were at least hundreds of orcs here. A cavalryman with a broken arm took out a short-barreled flintlock and fired a shot into the sky. Accompanied by an ear-piercing sound, a dazzling red signal flare soared into the sky. It could be clearly seen even 10 kilometers away. Looking at Jaina's blank expression, the cavalryman smiled. The thing sent by the Stormwind people is called a signal flare, which is specially used by our alliance to call for help. Although we don't like that damn Duque, but the thing he invented is still useful. Another cavalryman, who could no longer stand, panted and laughed. Come on, we still have to wait for the Stormwind elven women to come and save us. Elven women? Jaina did not react for a moment. The elven rangers belonging to Grand Duke Marcus of Stormwind. Although their noses are pointed at the sky, they are absolutely strong in forest battles. Our people won't be able to make it in time, so we have to see if there are any elven rangers in the vicinity. If there are no reinforcements, we won't last until nightfall. The cavalryman with a broken arm smiled bitterly. Jaina gritted her teeth. That's not necessarily true, I'm still here. You? Under the disbelieving gazes of the cavalryman, Jaina gritted her teeth, rolled up the hem of her mooncloth robe, took a step forward with her fair and tender legs, and stood on the back of the church's pew. Be careful of the troll's spears. Before the cavalryman finished speaking, he was stunned to find that there was an illusory translucent cover around Jaina. Holy light, she's actually a Sir Wizard. The cavalrymen guarding at the front also suddenly noticed the flames coming from behind them. Before they had time to turn their heads, a cold female voice sounded, "Fireball!" Asterisk bang. Asterisk with a loud sound, a huge fireball with a long tail of flames flew over the cavalryman's shield formation and exploded in the midst of the densely packed beastmen. Oh! The beastmen were clearly in an uproar. They watched in horror as several of their companions struggled in the flames and rolled on the cold ground. Some beastmen tried to help their companions put out the flames. They very professionally took off their animal skin clothes and patted them on their companions' bodies. This was useless. Before the fire weakened a little, the burning beastmen had already returned to the embrace of their ancestors. Asterisk bang. Asterisk another fireball. This time, 4 or 5 beastmen were hit. Their screams in the flames terrified their companions. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.